If I can have your attention, we'll get started. I'll just give you a rough outline of the program tonight. First of all, we are here to deal with a flood that mainly occurred in the TECHE district, the TECHE watershed during 2016, August of 2016. And this meeting is to report on a lot of efforts by a lot of volunteers, hydrologists, friends to Acadiana, that looked at what happened and then looked at what are the possible solutions to lowering stages in this watershed. And FEMA put out a report that's very prominent in this issue. They paid for recovery of about 3,900 homes in this watershed. 40% of them had a foot or less water. So if we can lower stages 2 or 3 feet, we can have an enormous impact on a lot fewer homes. Even at 1 foot, that was almost 1,600 homes that would not have flooded. We have gravity in our favor. The area we're talking about has been changed a lot over 100 years, dealing most with navigation. Because you go back a century and navigation on the waterways was the interstate highway system. It was everything. And so we did things like dredge BAYOU TECHE. We think that, BAYOU TECHE used to go by Washington all the way to Chico. And it was all winding and so forth, so they cut it off and brought it to Bayou Catawba. Historically, it never went to Bayou Catawba. So we tied it together. That was before the Civil War. We built the Keystone Locks on the TECHE in 1913. That was about navigation in low water. Then they built the locks and they drained all the water from the Iberian. So then they built the TECHE Lake Canal to get water for navigation. But in all this process, nobody's managing it for the flood. Then in 1935, we finished the levee system, where all the water from Alexandria on down left the area through Bayou Catawba into the Chafloy River. But 99% of the water in the 1 million acres above Bayou Catawba went into the Chafloy River. We closed that with a big levee. And now instead of going into the swamp, it comes into our homes. So the court has been kicking that can down the road, I guess, for the last 80 years. It's time to deal with it and fix it. So Ms. Dixon has done a lot of research. She's going to give a presentation on what happened. And then we'll have presenters. We have 7 or 8 presenters that will talk about, their part in it, parish presidents, and I'll introduce each one as they come up to talk. So, and then, very important, we want your input. We want your ideas. We want to hear your questions, because that's what a public meeting is about. And I'll cite one example. We were dealing with dredging a 40-mile canal across the Million Bay and into the Gulf. It was going to cost $60 million. But it was going to bring a job to the port that would employ 3,000 people for 2 years. So it's super important to the economy. And we had a public meeting like this, and I think it was a commercial fisherman stood up and says, I don't know why y'all going through all that baloney. He said, freshwater by locks is a problem. Just dredge a little canal around it. And instead of spending $60 million, we spent $1 million, got the project, did very little harm to the environment. But none of us bright boys figured that out. Someone in the audience did. So we need your input. So Ms. Dixon has been a volunteer, worked in this for the last 1.5 years. His home almost flooded, it didn't, but I think he's very anxious to make sure it doesn't. So Dave, exactly right. Proceed.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. Let me start this timer here so I don't get bogged down here. I think big focus here is going to be regional. We're not going to be talking about coulees or anything like that or levees. We're talking about regional. We're talking about getting the water out of the region. Okay, and with that, the agenda, Harold's already done the welcome and the introductions, and I'm going to be doing a presentation. And we have some contributing speakers, including, well, they're not in right order. It didn't work out right, but we'll go ahead and put them all up there. And so you can see all the names of the people here. Guy Cormier, Bill Fontenot, Larry Richard, Donald Segura, Dr. David Cheramy, Monique Boulay, Dr. J. Paul Kemp, Mark Wingate, and Nick Sims. We put the Corps engineers last because we're going to put them on the spot and ask them for some very specific help with some of this stuff. Okay, topics are going to include a video overview of the regional watershed. So what we're going to do with this video overview, we're going to condense about 3 days worth of field trips into about a 12-minute video here. So I'm going to see how this is going to work here. So I'm going to end my slideshow, and then I'm going to go to my videos here, and I'm going to do the regional overview.
What we're going to do in this video is to give you a little overview of the watershed, floodplains, and control structures that we're going to talk about in the following presentation. And we're going to use Google Earth to do that. So what we'll do, we're going to zoom in on these features which I marked up on this in this system here so we can easily find what we're going to talk about here. And we're going to start up north. We're going to talk about Bayou Catawba to get everybody familiar with what's happening with Bayou Catawba, which impacts us down here in the Lafayette area. This whole area south of Alexandria is actually the Bayou Catawba watershed. And the Bayou Catawba is down here in St. Landry Parish, and it connects to us, which we'll get into some detail about how it connects to the Vermilion River and the Bayou TECHE. So to give you some idea of the Bayou Catawba watershed, all this area between this red line, which roughly parallels I-49 on the west side, and this red line over here, which is the west of Chapel Spillway levee, which you may know as the Henderson levee, all this area in here drains, eventually ends up into Bayou Catawba. And a lot of that water comes down to us in Lafayette, and some of it goes down Bayou TECHE. Okay, so with that, we'll talk about a couple other control structures we have, and we'll start with the TECHE Vermilion pumping station, okay, which is part of the TECHE Vermilion freshwater project. And we'll zoom in right here, and the purpose of this system here, which was installed in the early 80s, is to pump fresh water out of the Atchafalaya River right here into this canal, which connects to the Bayou Catawba over on the other side of the spillway, the West Atchafalaya Spillway, to provide fresh water into the TECHE Vermilion system to keep the system flushed out. A tremendously beneficial project to keep our river with some fresh water in the river, our river and the bayou with fresh water. We'll show you a picture of the pumping station here. Okay, that's what it looks like. And there's a series of pumps. And another thing to note here is they only run this thing when they need to run it. It doesn't run all the time. It runs whenever there's not sufficient rainfall in the watershed to provide fresh water down Bayou TECHE and the Vermilion River. Okay, so how does it get to, once it gets in the Bayou Catawba on this end, how does it get to us? And we'll talk about that in a second here. It actually comes in the Bar Pit Canal, and this is Bayou Catawba right here and Port Barry, and the Bayou TECHE headwaters are connected to Bayou Catawba and right in the middle of town of Port Barry. And we'll zoom in on that. Okay, so that's your Bayou TECHE headwaters. You can see the connection right here. This is Bayou Catawba, and this is Bayou TECHE. And I might note here, Bayou Catawba is a very large stream, much larger than the Vermilion River, and when it runs through Lafayette, so it can handle a significant amount of water. Okay, so right here, when they pump into Bayou Catawba, the water's coming back around this way, and it goes down Bayou TECHE, and it actually comes to us by the Bayou TECHE Bayou Fuselier connection in Arnoldville, Louisiana. Okay, in Arnoldville, the headwaters of the Vermilion River are actually called Bayou Fusilier, Bayou Vermilion, and it's right in the middle, again, right in the middle of town. A similar thing, it's where the river comes off of the Bayou, off of the Bayou Teche, right in the middle of town. So when the Teche Vermilion pumps, or if we get a flood from the north, a lot of times water comes down this connection right here down to us. Okay, so let's go back to some of the control structures that are in play here that we're going to be talking about making some changes to. Okay, and when they built the levee system after the Great Flood of 27, they completed the West Chapel Spillway levee around 1935, and this is the levee right here. Okay, and they basically blocked Bayou right here. But they opened it up to the Bar Pit Canal to allow Bayou to drain to the south, eventually down to Lake Falls Point. Okay, well, after there was several floods in in the decade of the 40s, they put this control structure in 57 to allow fresh water to come into the basin. This is the West Chapel Spillway on the right side. And also provide some level of, I guess, flood management. When they put the Teche Vermilion freshwater project in, they built some weirs, and they put a levee right here, and they closed off the Bar Pit Canal, and they put a small gate right there. We're gonna examine and look at that here in just a minute. You can see from the aerial photograph that these gates are much smaller than the channel in Bayou right here, maybe 10 to 15% of the channel capacity. So the first thing we'll take a look at is the gates. We have a picture of the gates right here. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and the Corps engineers control these gates. And again, they're relatively small. We'll look at the gate right here on the Bar Pit Canal. And here we go, here's the gate, and this is Bayou you're looking at on the top, and this is the Bar Pit Canal on the bottom, and you can see it's one small gate, very small pipe that goes through that levee right there. And to show you a little bit about the typical elevations we're dealing with here, if you note down here, there's an elevation reading. If I put the mouse over the bayou at 16 foot, and I put the mouse over the Bar Pit Canal, it's 1 foot. So you have typically a 15-foot head. And the reason the Bayou is held that high is so it can push water back around to Teche and the Vermilion. Okay. There's a couple other control structures here. There's some weirs. There's two of them, one here and one here. They are around 16-foot elevation. We'll give you a picture of the weir right here. And what happens with the weir is that, again, you'll notice that the bayou is about 16 feet, and on this side of the weir, it's like 3 feet. When the water gets too high in Bayou, it'll overflow the weir. It eventually joins the Bar Pit Canal further down south and allows an escape hatch for the water. During the flood of 16, what happened at the weirs was it overflowed significantly. Here's a picture of the weir. It's a concrete structure, non-adjustable. There's one of our guys walking on it. This is Bayou on this side, and then the overflow goes this way. And down here is a picture of Harold, where we found trash in the trees, probably 10 feet over the weir. You see the weir down here, and he's standing up on the bank, and he's reaching up. Trash on the trees 10 feet above the weir, so the water came over the weir at least 10 feet above the weir during the flood of 16. Tremendous volume of water was going down the Bar Pit Canal, but not enough. Okay, and that was causing some problems. Okay, so essentially, by holding Bayou at 16 foot, it's basically all your retention in there is pretty well gone. Okay, so we're going to take a look now at some of the floodplains, and the first one we're going to look at here is with Cypress Island, Lake Martin, Cypress Island Swamp, Lake Martin, and you folks may know it as mostly as the Lake Martin area. Again, if you look at the elevation here is approximately 6 feet in a lot of this area right here. Let's see if we can find it where it's at. There's some low areas in here. It's relatively low, and generally whenever the river flows backwards, this is the area that floods, that fills up with water, okay? And then the only way out is back through the Vermilion River. And it fills up when the river runs backwards, but it also fills up from the water from the north too. Okay, all right, and then we're going to talk about the Keystone Lock and Dam, and we're going to be addressing that in our presentation that followed. And we'll zoom in on that and talk a little bit about that and tell you a little history on that. It's on the BAYOU TECHE, and it's a facility that's operated by the Corps of Engineers. It basically holds the water level on the north side of the dam in BAYOU TECHE at I think it's 10 feet a minimum to allow for navigation. It is not designed for flood control. It is only designed for navigation, even though maybe it should have been sacrificed during the flood of 16 to allow more water to go down to TECHE. And what happens when the water goes down to TECHE? It ends up in Lake Foss Point, which we're going to look at next. It's over here by Lowerville. Okay. And Lake Foss Point is at elevation of approximately 1 foot above sea level, 1 or 2 feet above sea level. And we'll show you some pictures of Lake Foss Point. Okay, and it's a big low area. And the key thing to know about this when we get into the presentation is that it's on the outside of our side of the Western Chapel Spillway or Henderson Levee. Okay, and the levee was put on this side over here by the Corps to allow this to be a floodplain for the outside the levee area. Okay, and with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the story about what we think the problems are and what we think the solutions are.
Okay. There's going to be another video at the end that's going to give you a visual of what our recommendations are. So, with that, we can kill this right here. And go back to the PowerPoint. Whoops. I don't know why I did that. He wants to act crazy. Okay, there we go. All right, sorry about that. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do is try to provide some understanding of what happened during the flood of 16. Okay, and we're going to try to provide some analysis. Okay, whether right or wrong, it's our analysis of what happened. And then we're going to make these regional recommendations for prevention of future flood events. Okay, and how do we get this information? Well, we took data from NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric, which is basically the National Weather Service, USGS, Army Corps of Engineers, and we made several field trips. I just seen about 3 days of our field trips in about 12 minutes on the video there. Okay. I think it's really important to understand what's happened here historically. Okay, historically, we had some floods in the 1940s. Okay, and the floods in the 1940s were, the first one was extremely significant. In fact, it was in August of 1940. On August the 9th of 1940, we had a flood that was 7 foot higher than the flood that was of 16. So this has happened before here in Lafayette. Okay, and in fact, in 42 and 47, we had 2 more floods that were pretty close to what happened in 16. And then after those events, According to the USGS, they dredged the river in 57, but Harold, memory says it was actually more around 1950. And they constructed the drainage structure at BAYOU that we took a look at in the video around in 1957. And then another thing regarding timing is that in '82 they commissioned the TECHE Vermilion freshwater project, and in the '90s NOAA lowered the flood stage. But after the first two things in 57 and 50 and 57, a key important point is we had no major additional floods happen on the Vermilion for the next 59 years until the 16 flood. So that did us some good for 59 years, okay? So, and the reason for why we should have a sense of urgency here, okay, so what I did, living across the street from the river, I noticed that the river was flooding more frequently, and one of my neighbors is here that lives right on the river, and he told me, yeah, it is, okay, he's sitting right there. And so I was interested in seeing after the flood what was actually happening. So I pulled the NOAA data and I put it in a spreadsheet, and I did an analysis on it. And you can see that we were having a flood every 5 years back in the decade of the 70s, and now we're having a flood once a year in this decade. That's a 12-foot flood. That's the old flood stage, okay? And you can see the trend line is the red line. It is steadily trending up. Okay, and then they lowered the flood stage to 10 feet. And what you're looking at here is the number of 10-foot floods that we've had in the community on the Vermilion River since 2000. They did that in the late 90s, so only went back to 2000 here. And you can see it is trending up also. We're having right at 3 10-foot flood events per year. We just had another one last week. Okay, last Sunday? Okay, Saturday? Okay. Okay, so we asked a question. Well, is rainfall increasing? Okay. Well, the blue line on the top is the annual rainfalls from 1999 forward, and the dotted line is the trend. Okay, and you can see it's trending up. Okay, but the flood of 16 caused it to trend up probably more. We consider that an outlier. So what we did, we normalized that to the 10-year average for 16, and the rainfall, the annual rainfall is essentially pretty flat, okay? A lot flatter than the frequency of flooding, which is the red line at the bottom, okay? Which is steadily trending up. So we said, well, is it flooding in some other areas, okay? So we wanted to look at some other areas that had some flood data that NOAA posted that's north of us and west of us. And so we looked at the Red River up at Alexander. 79 miles north as the crow flies, and the flood frequencies declined since 1970. By Cocodrie at Clearwater, 58 miles as the crow flies due north, flood frequency has declined since 1970. And by the Canes, which is near Eunice, 35 miles northwest of Lafayette, the flood frequency declined between 70 and 2010, then it trended upwards. And the Mermentau River at Mermentau, it declined between 1970 and 2000, then it trended upward. But the Vermilion River has steadily increased since 1970. Okay. Oops. Steady increases, okay. All right, and another thing we looked at, okay, we looked at how many drains were coming into the river. And the USGS published a study of the watershed of the Vermilion River, and where they documented all the coulees that came into the river, the coulees and the bayous, and they measured them. Okay, they measured them, and they also measured the river along at different points in the river, more or less in conjunction with where the coulees reside. So what you're looking at here is really just a simple trend. It looks a little complicated, but the trend is the blue line is the river capacity, okay, and channel size, okay. The brown line is all the coulees upstream. If you look across the bottom, is places along the river where they took these measurements. And you can see, when we get to Surrey Street, we're underwater, that the coulees coming into the river are bigger than the river itself. In fact, when we get to the sewage treatment plant on West Bayou Parkway, the river's 90% smaller than all the upstream coulees. So like when you have a regional type event and water's coming in full force into the river and all these inflows into the river is being overwhelmed. Okay, and actually, and if you look out to the right of the chart at the very end, the river doesn't catch up to the coulees till you get all the way down to Vermilion Bay. So the river is not adequately sized for all these inflows. And there's a whole bunch of undocumented inflows, and this study was done in 1988. You think about all the drains that's been dropped into the river since 1988. Think about that drain in that big development at the corner of Kali Saloom and Ambassador Cafferty, where they built Costco and all those stores there. You know, those are huge, huge drains that's easily equal to a lot of the size of these coulees and such, okay? So the drain in my subdivision, my subdivision is 55 acres. Well, the pipe is 6 feet in diameter. It's huge. That wasn't documented in the study. These are just the major coulees and the major bayous that flow into the Vermilion. And we get underwater pretty quick going down there. So we took a look at what happened during the flood. Okay, and the next slide is going to be, this is the discharge of the volumetric data, the volume that's flowing at Surrey Street. And you'll notice there's a zero line up there. And everything, I wish I could see my mouse, but I can't. So I'm having a little trouble with it. Where's it at? I'm lost. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, that zero line right there, when the data is above the zero, the river's flowing south. When the data is below the zero, the river's flowing north into Cypress Island. Okay, so we had about 58 hours that the river flowed north into Cypress Island, and when the river turned around and started flowing back south again, it coincided with the crest on the river. Okay, and during that period of time, we put in about 42,590 acre feet of water. An acre foot of water is the amount of water that a 1 foot of water would cover an acre. Okay, and that 42,590 acre feet of water, that's equal to 66.54 square miles of water a foot deep. Okay, that's not the rest of the story. We're going to get in the rest of the story here. Okay, you'll notice too, one key thing here is that the peak flow going south is much slower than the peak flow going north, which is crazy. Okay, so actually the water goes to Cypress Island quicker than it goes to Vermilion Bay. In fact, almost over twice as fast. So that ought to tell you something about what's happening south in the river. So next we're going to look at what happened when the water started coming out of the river. Okay, so this right here, on August the 15th, about 3 of the river crested, and October the 8th, 55 days later, that's almost 2 months, okay, the river stage fell to the level below the flood event. In other words, it returned to the level it was before the flood event. And I calculated the volumetrics on that. Approximately 274,000 acre feet of water flowed south into Vermilion Bay after the river quit falling, because it was emptying out all of the area north of us. It was emptying out Cypress Island. And this is just Surrey Street north measurement. That doesn't include any water that went into the Vermilion south of Surrey Street. The analysis is that a significant amount of the water that went through that point at the Surrey Street Bridge came out of Cypress Island, North Lafayette Parish, and the Bayou Catawba watershed. Okay, if that makes any sense. Okay, and just to give you some idea where the river was flood-wise, 12 days, the river was greater than the major flood stage. It took a long time for it to go down. The major flood stage is 16 feet. In 21 days was greater than the moderate flood stage, that's 14 feet. 28 days, the river was at the old 12-foot flood stage. And then 55 days, again, to return to the pre-flood stage. It took forever for the river to drain, forever. And it's because of all the water from the north, all the water from Cypress Island, and this is at Surrey. So this doesn't include everything south of us, okay?
Excuse me, can you speak closer to the mic?
Oh, okay,
Because
I'm
we're
sorry.
not hearing you in the other room.
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay, so we looked at, okay, we calculated, how fast was the river falling, okay? The river, for the first 12 days while it was over major flood stage, only fell 16 100ths of an inch. That's hardly nothing. That's just a few inches a day. Hardly nothing, okay? And then a quarter of a foot, 16 100ths of a foot. A quarter of a foot, which is three inches, that's this much right here, for the next 44 days, over the average over the next 44 days it took for the water to go out, okay? So we said, well, was the problem the weather, okay? Well, we looked at that too. We looked at from the crest of the river to October the 8th, the rain only totaled 6.61 inches, which is slightly less than normal for that period of time, okay? From August 15th to October 8th, we had 37 days with north, northeast, and northwest winds. That's favorable to pushing the tide out, to assisting the river in draining. We only had 18 days with south, southeast, or southwest winds, so we had predominantly favorable winds 66% of the time. We even looked at the tides. We looked at the tides on Vermilion Bay under pressure, and we had no abnormally high tides in this period of time. That was inhibiting the river to drain. And we're going to come to the conclusions why we think that happened, okay? So, and we also looked at BAYOU TECHE as a comparison. The Keystone Dam has some instruments on the Keystone Dam that we took the data from. It was only 2 days above 16 feet. They don't record flood stages on the TECHE at the Keystone. They do record the level, but they don't call it a flood stage, okay? They just take a measurement. So I used the Vermilion numbers just as a comparison point, okay? It was 2 days greater than 16, and then it fell below 16 in 2 days, where it took us, what I said, 14 days or something to go below 16 on the Vermilion. 7 days to go below 14. And there's a key thing about this too. 14 days to go below 12, 19 days to go 11. And here's the key thing. There's a 10-foot weir in the Keystone Dam. So you got the channels being blocked off by a weir. So the only channel capacity you have is what's over the weir. So, but the moral of this story is that considering that we're still having, considering that we have a weir in there, it's still draining much more efficiently south of the Keystone Dam in BAYOU TECHE into Lake Falls Point than the Vermilion River is draining to the Gulf of Mexico. So it took 40 days for it to return to pre-flood stage, but remember, once the bayou gets on.
Dave,
They're having trouble hearing in the
Oh,
other
they're still
room. We
having
have a new
trouble?
mic
Okay.
for you.
Okay.
This is the mic. This is the piece that you talk into.
All right.
And
We can set it
you want me to?
Just put it in my back pocket right there.
Should be ready.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Sorry about that. I heard y'all heard some of this anyway. Have to start over again? My timer says I've only got about 10 or 15 more minutes, okay? So, all right, here we go. Some comparisons, again, the river was 12 days over 16, the bayou was 2 days. 55 days for the river return to pre-flood, 40 days for the bayou with a 10-foot weir in it, okay? You need me to do that? Okay, there we go. All right, the volumes, water from the north of Lafayette into the river or the BAYOU TECHE, okay? Approximately, again, 274,000 acre feet. 212 acre feet at the Keystone Dam. And we think that's underreported, by the way, because the Keystone Dam, we understand that the water went over what the gauge is able to measure. That's a total of 486,538 acre feet of water between the two water bodies. That's 760 square miles of water a foot deep. And of course, that doesn't include what went over those weirs and what went into the basin up there by Catawba. So, and again, these volumes don't include the water that went into the river south of Surrey Street. So the summary and our conclusions here is that the greater than 12-foot flood frequencies on the Vermilion have increased by a factor of 5 times since 1970. Local parish coulee maintenance is not the only problem, and building retention problems is not the only problem, okay? The Vermilion River is draining very slowly, okay, and the Vermilion watershed has changed. Let's talk a little bit about the Vermilion River. Me and Harold floated the river during the flood, right when the river was still at 10 feet, and we had a very precision depth finder, and we had a pole just to check, and we found spots in the river where the river was only 2 and 3 feet deep. Okay, and the surge gauge was at 10 feet. So there's significant shoaling in the river, and I've had more people tell me that's going to have to be removed if we're ever going to get this river to drain. And the shoaling don't exist just in Lafayette Parish. Shoaling exists south of us too. Okay, that's the reason it took 55 days for the river to get back to normal stage. So the causations, the possible causations. That showing I just talked about, the flood water flows and backflows into Cypress Island, so Cypress Island, and it's a good thing it goes in there for at least provides some marginal floodplain, not where it needs to go. It needs to go to Lake Falls Point. There's inadequate floodgate drainage at by Catawba and the West Chapfire Spillway Levee, and there's inadequate channel capacity at BAYOU TECHE. The Keystone Dam, we think, is a restriction in the system. Okay, so other potential issues, unintended consequences of the freshwater project by blocking the Bar Pit Canal and not putting big enough gates there. And don't get me wrong, the freshwater project is a very beneficial project to the community. It keeps our bayou and our river flushed out with fresh water. It adds tremendously to water quality. The Red River Navigation Project is a suspect because they raise pool stages in the Red. So I don't think anything up there by Alexander drains into the Red anymore. It all comes to see us down here. Okay, that's what we're thinking. Okay, it needs to be investigated. Increased development in the metro area, water hits the river quicker. Bridges on the river designed in the 50s causing a dam effect. Now these are all potential issues, okay, that needs further investigation. And just too many drains into the river. Not that we're going to block any of them, we just need to make the river and the bayou handle them, okay? So our remedies and recommendations are to add additional floodgates to the Catawba West Chapfire Spillway Levee, to provide an alternate drain for the Cypress Island Swamp, to add floodgates and control gates in the Keystone Dam, and dredge the river in conjunction with the parish coulee cleaning and retention pond efforts. And with that, we're going to show another video. It's going to be a visual recommendation of our recommendations here. And we're going to try this again so we can keep from messing it up. Oh, here we go.
Okay, now that you've seen our overview of the watershed and you've seen our presentation regarding what we think the problems are and the solutions are, what we're going to do is give you a visual overview of the solutions as we see it, so you have a little better understanding about what we're talking about. The first solution we're going to start with is we'll start at the north, and we're going to talk about enlarging the gates on the West Chapfire Spillway Levee on by Catawba, which is right south of US 190 on what we call the Henderson Levee again. Okay, and here we're going to zoom in right here and we'll look at it here. Okay, so what we're talking about doing here is making these gates larger right here where they go to the levee to allow water to flood by Catawba into the basin. And then the other thing right there in that same area is put some gates here on the Bar Pit Canal to allow water to go down the Bar Pit Canal. Significantly different level normally in the bayou and in the Bar Pit Canal. It'll drain pretty quick if they got some big gates. So in addition to doing this construction work, of course, the process would have to be put in place. If there's an impending large rain event, you know, a tropical storm, hurricane, etc., that these gates are opened and the levels in Bayou Catawba are lowered ahead of time to restore some retention in Catawba, and also provide a drain out into the basin and down the Bar Pit Canal to Lake Falls Point. In fact, the first couple of solutions we're going to talk about is trying to get water down to Lake Falls Point, which we see as a natural floodplain for our area, outside the west side of the levee area. Okay, the second thing we're going to look at is we're going to talk about adding a canal and a control structure to allow, again, an outlet of Cypress Island swamp down to provide a channel down to south of Keystone Dam to allow with the control structure to allow Cypress Island to be able to drain to Lake Falls Point via the Bayou TECHE down here south of Keystone Dam. If we could get a channel the size of, say, the Vermilion River, 10 by 100 foot channel, it would provide a secondary drain that whenever Cypress Island fills with water, it doesn't all have to come back down to Vermilion. And again, a process would have to be put in place to open up these controls. And so whenever that water starts going in the lake, in the Cypress Island Lake Martin area, that it starts coming on out here and going toward Keystone Dam and correspondingly down to Lake Falls Point, which again is our floodplain. Another thing we could do is add some control gates in the Keystone Dam. We'll talk about that. Okay, and we'll zoom in on that. Okay, and I believe that was a recommendation after the flood of '93 by the Corps, was to provide some control gates in the Keystone Dam. Right now it's got a fixed 10-foot weir that would allow opening those gates during an impending flood event again to allow water to go down to TECHE, down to Lake Falls Point. It also could facilitate lowering the level in Bayou TECHE ahead of an impending event. So that brings us to our last recommended solution. And we'll take a look at that. And that's maintenance dredge the river. During the flood event of 2016, Harold and I floated the river with a precision depth finder, and with Surrey Street was still at 10 feet. And what we found was that there were some areas that the river was only 3.5 feet deep at best. Extensive shoaling, and that's not true of the whole river, but there's evidently shoals in the river at different places, and those shoals would have to be removed, could be removed by dredging the river, which could restore the original design channel capacity of 10 by 100 when the Corps first dredged the river back in 1950 or so. So with that, that's our four main key points to fix the problem here. Would like to open it up for any questions you may have regarding our presentation or our recommendations here, and then we'll have some speakers, some esteemed speakers from some of the organizations that's dealing with this issue after we finish filling the questions and answers. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Okay, we're gonna hold the questions and answers to the end. And I've got a few benefits here that we think that we could gain by executing these recommendations. Obviously, future flood prevention. I think it would contribute to better quality, water quality in the basin, Cypress Island and Lake Falls Point. Possibly lower our flood insurance rates, okay? And improve community credit ratings for bond issues. Some rating entities are threatening to downgrade ratings for municipalities if they don't address their flooding risk, okay? And I don't know if the course is here yet, but I'm gonna ask to close the sale right here. I'm gonna ask for 3 immediate procedural changes for the Corps. Is when there's a forecast for a large rain event, open the Bayou Catawba gates and lower levels in Catawba ahead of time. So we can start restoring some retention capacity in Catawba and get the water moving toward the basin. Execute a test of using the lock gates on the Keystone to assist in lowering the stages. So we could determine whether or not, that's gonna help us. And if that helps us, the third thing is, if the test proves successful, put in place a procedural operation to utilize the lock as a flood control method until the remaining remediation efforts are completed. And what that would buy us was maybe some time to get the remediation done. And it would prove the theory that we could lower the stages in the system by allowing another drain down through the Keystone Dam. In our research, we found historically in the 1927 flood, the greatest flood that North America has ever been in recorded history, they actually opened those gates and let the water go through the Keystone Dam. They had like 27 foot or 25 foot level at Keystone, and they opened those gates. And I did just a quick calculation on it, and this is not final numbers, but I think it would double the capacity of what the TECHE could handle, double the channel capacity of the TECHE. Okay, now how that impacts downstream, I don't know, but the Corps should know.
Yeah.
Okay. Flood who? No, we're not gonna flood you there. Yeah. Okay, with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to Harold, and we're gonna take the questions after all the speakers.
All right, thank you so much, Dave. Let's give him a hand for a great job. And a lot of folks around think nothing has been done, but a lot has been done. And one of the most important things that has been done in this whole event was attributable to the parish leaders, Guy Cormier for one, Bill Fontenot, who pulled all the parishes together into one voice and dealing with this as a regional concept. The cure has to be a regional thing. It is not for one parish to do. One parish can't solve this. And because we were pulling all together, FEMA brought into place through the efforts of the governor $25 million, which I think will go to this flood issue. And those projects will be looked at and approved tomorrow at a meeting. Miss Monique's going to talk about that. But the guy that really put it all together is Guy Cormier. And Guy Cormier is here to talk to us for a little bit. Guy?
Thank you, Mr. Howe. I appreciate the opportunity to, I don't know if is there a camera for the people next door? I don't want to walk around. Yeah, you probably got a camera.
Wait, KDN Open Channel is here filming this event, so it can be re-aired later on for the rest of the public to hear it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Howe, for the introduction. And Mr. Howe gave me some credit, but I really want to give credit where credit is due. It was not just me that single-handedly pulled everybody together. It was a phone call I received from a guy who doesn't even live in my parish, but has a lot of interaction with a lot of my parish folks. During the event, it wasn't probably 56, 72 hours after the event, or after the event the rain had finally stopped, that Mr. Harrell actually called me and said, I just think we need to pay attention to what's going on. This is something we can maybe document. There's not a whole bunch I think we can do because so much rain has fallen in such a short period of time. But we need to see if we can improve things for later on. And that's what we all call mitigation. You can hear that word a lot, mitigation. And I appreciate Dave's presentation, but I think the great lead in to his presentation was, we don't know what kind of impact it's going to have downstream. And it seems like, and I'm not knocking Dave's presentation, he's done a lot of work, but it seems like a lot of his attention is making sure that the water doesn't come to Lafayette. It has to go around Lafayette. And I'm just saying, I'm being serious. The reason why we tried to pull all together is because we wanted to approach this from a regional perspective, because if you're just gonna move the problem somewhere else, you didn't solve the problem. And so in some of your cases, and I know we got a packed house with people who have their homes have flooded. Some of you in the Youngsville area, I know for a fact, you had water for 3 or 4 days and it was gone and you started stripping your homes down. In my parish, I had folks that had water in their house for 38 days. And if you say, what's the difference? If you have water in your house, you have water in your house. Imagine if you have a house that has water in it for 38 days, what the roof looks like. I'm talking about the interior ceiling looks like. Black mold, like it was just unbelievable. And there's 2 types of floods, all right? So I heard somebody say we flooded Saturday, right? And we did. In some cases you did. But there's 2 types of floods. That's called a flash flood. Saturday morning or Friday afternoon, the Vermilion River is about 5 foot. Within 12 hours, the Vermilion River is past flood stage. That's a flash flood. The next day, it started dropping off really quick. And then you have something called a backwater flood. And that's 30 inches of rain. 30 inches of rain. We normally get 60 inches of rain in a year in our part of Louisiana. We got 30 inches in 2 days. And that water has to go somewhere. So it swells. And it starts flowing north when it's not supposed to flow north. And it starts filling in areas that it's not supposed to fill in. And we know for a fact that it's going to be hard for us, or the Corps engineer, to try to design something that's going to protect us from a 30-year rain. I mean, a 30-inch rain in a matter of a couple days. You know, some meteorologists called it a 500-year flood. Some meteorologists called it a 1,000-year flood. I don't really believe all that because I'm only 52 years old, and I think I've lived through 10 100-year floods. So that would make me 1,000 years old. But at the end of the day, we know that the last time we saw an event like this, because I have pictures that document it, was 1940, at least in my parish. That whole Cypress Island swamp had filled it to capacity, more so than it did now, because in 1956, they dug a channel. They didn't have one prior to 56. They had a channel above the locks that would drain the Cypress Island swamp. But after the 1940 flood, the Corps engineer in their wisdom said, we need to dig something south of the locks and let that whole area drain south of the locks, and they did that, and this has helped. And they talked about possible solutions, and we'll get into that a little bit later on about the Keystone locks. But during the August 16 flood, I was raised on the Keystone locks. Where they talking about this dam, I walked across it 1,000 times as a kid. That's where I was raised. You couldn't see the dam. The dam was under the water 12, 15 feet. The water was going over the lock itself. If there was a structure there and you can open it up, possibly, but you'd have flooded downstream a lot more than you did. So I think we need to learn from the 30-inch rainfall that we received, or the 500-year or 1,000-year event. But that's not going to help you in a flash flood situation like you had last Saturday. That's a whole different type of flooding. To say that Lafayette Parish is overbuilt on a system that can't handle it, I'm going to tell you the truth. Yeah, I'm a common sense kind of guy. And he's still building on a system that can't handle it. The Vermilion River think about what the Vermilion River looked like in 1940. And some of you probably have been here. I wasn't born in 40. And look at it now. I mean, and look, that's economics. Everywhere our retail my people leave St. Martin Parish every day to come shop in Lafayette. And it's all, where they shopping is all around along the Vermilion area. It used to be the Northgate Mall when I was a kid. That drained in the Vermilion as well, but from a different area. Now it's all south, and they're just building and building and building and building. And so I think there's going to be more flash flood events for you guys, because they've said it. That river's supposed to flow south. It's not supposed to flow north in my parish where it floods. We're lucky to have that big swamp, that big natural retention area that's been there since Earth was created. We're lucky to have that. And I understand it's in my parish, and I'll be the first to admit that a lot of my folks that flooded, if you look at that, if you were able to zoom in on Dave's map that shows this beautiful Cypress Island swamp, and it is a beautiful swamp, by the way. There's a little fine, perfect little line that goes right through I guess maybe 1/3 of it. And if you look at it, if you zoom in on that line, it's a highway that we built, because We didn't want to, we got impatient. We didn't want to have to pass around that swamp to get to Lafayette anymore. So we built a highway through the swamp. The swamp was there before us, and a lot of my people decided to build homes on there because it opened up property. Those homes flooded. We should have learned something a long time ago that we should have probably never even built the highway, but we did it. And if you pass on if you go on to Lake Martin, and most of you probably been to Lake Martin, you got to drive down off the road to get off. The road is real high. Our forefathers said we're gonna keep it dry. That road went underwater during the 16 flood. So all I'm saying is that we need to think about this from a regional perspective, because if we don't, I can tell you this: in the 16 flood, Lafayette flooded, St. Martin flooded, Iberia flooded, St. Landry flooded. My friends in Vermilion, they have the police jury president for Vermilion is here. Y'all want to push more water? We got to dredge. This all has to be done. It has to be studied. And I'm all about making sure that we do this right. But we Mr. Harold said it. Dave said it. We got to get our water out faster till we can get it in the Gulf. Well, we had a south wind blowing against us in August of 16, and if you go talk to the people in the Abbeville area, they had water in their house. So if you're going to just push it to somebody else, I mean, I think we all fooling ourselves. I would hope that we can collectively work together, and I think Ms. Monique's going to come up here from Acadiana Planning Commission's perspective to talk about what we're doing and moving forward. And we're grateful for the $25 million that we received. Extremely grateful for Congressman Higgins pushing to get it, for the governor to be able to allow us to spend it just for our area. That didn't happen nowhere else in Louisiana. We're the only ones that got that much money to be able to at least start our projects because we're working together. I talked to my friends in Bossier, in Caddo, in Ouachita, in the co-meet, in the A-meet area. They all got $3 and $4 million. We got 25 to try to fix our issues because, and the governor, this is his words, because we are working together to try to get something done. But I'm here to tell you that these projects that we all talking about, some of them are common sense and they can be done. And 25 million is a lot of money. But my taxpayers went to the polls in December of 2016, and we're gonna spend 25 million in drainage work just in my parish. Y'all went to the polls in 2017 last year, and y'all gonna spend north of 20 million in your parish. So think about that for a second. 25 million for the whole region. We're trying to do projects that impact the region. And I'll say this in closing. If we keep building on systems or doing things like building highways through a swamp, and we keep overbuilding on systems that can't handle it, things are not going to get any better. They're just going to get worse. And so I would hope that we can all use some common sense when we do some things. And I'm not so certain that there's a fix-all, cure-all. There's one just magic project that's going to get it all fixed and nobody's going to flood again. I'm not a fool. I mean, I was kind of raised on a sugarcane farm too, so I know a little bit about drainage, and I know I hunted the Cypress Island swamp. It can only take so much. So I think we just got to do things from a smarter perspective. And having said that, before I introduce Miss Monique, I want to introduce my friend who's the president of our Acadiana Planning Commission, but is also a civil engineer who's been doing this for a long time, Mr. Bill Fontenot, the St. Landry Parish President.
Hey, thank you very much. So Bill is the parish president. He was the district engineer in the Louisiana Department of DOTD for many years, and he is a real engineer. And he's very involved in the Acadiana economic development. So Bill, we welcome you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. And I've been to some of Mr. Harrell's meetings before with transportation and now with drainage, and usually I end up leaving the meeting pretty beat up. So hopefully tonight I have more support. But there's nothing like high water and a big issue such as the 16 flood that can bring people together, as you see tonight. And just to elaborate a little bit more on what Guy said, and Guy's been as he said of me, he's been a great partner. And solutions for this take good cooperating partnerships, some good engineering, and of course funding for implementation. I mean, let's face the reality here. We're a water state, and we really don't have good watershed management drainage in this state that's funded to any degree. One bit of good news, there's the 25 million from the feds. Guy's got 25 million in his parish. The good bit of news is I can't convince my people in St. Landry to pass taxes for drainage, so there won't be improved drainage coming upon you, because we can't pass those kind of taxes. But I want to say they want drainage, and a good, I have to say, a good friend engineer of mine who's still with the DOTD and is from St. Martin Parish. We talk about this a lot because highways are impacted by drainage, good drainage, and development. And at DOTD, when I was there, and that's still the case, you must come as a business there to get permits for access. And also, we've been very guarded over the last 20 years that you have and you consultants in here know about that. We have very strict retention, detention plans so that you don't add more water and increase the flows without retaining some of that and regulate it off your new impervious pavements that when you build a business. So it's all good planning that's incrementally being improved and allocated towards projects. But like the projects we're talking about today, you need to keep believing in them. It might not be for your benefit in your lifetime, but it's the future, because these projects take a long time to develop. So you gotta be vigilant. Our part in our lifetime now is to be vigilant about this good plan and demand it takes some government help. Federal, state, and local need to have a good water management plan that needs to be funded and be as important and significant as a good transportation plan, especially where we live. Because it's about jobs, it's about damages to homes, it's about quality of life. I mean, it's about making a living on the water. So water is very important to us, and especially down here in the South. My good friend I was talking about a second ago, and he was talking about, when we would talk about these issues of flooding and talking about the backwaters in Martin Parish, and he's from St. Martin Parish, and he worked right next door to me and worked for me for a while, and I think he's still there. And he said the solution that he saw that would be most effective is just continue that levee, just branch off of that levee around 190 and just run it over the south side of St. Landry Parish and just make that the retainage and detention center. And that way, that would be a big help. And I don't know if that's not a pretty good, decent idea, because we have some high ground. We might have high enough ground for us to be able to survive, but we have to move around quite a bit. But we need to, and we're proud to be in St. Landry Parish, a cooperating partner. From the time I was born in 1951, my dad was 20 years old at that time. He was working for the Soil Conservation Service, and he worked for them till he was 76. And so all I heard when I was growing up was water, watersheds, water plans. He'd bring back books, and I would look at the watershed plans. And the federal government, state government were funding big water improvements. And a lot of it was based originally on helping farming, because farming is still king in our state. And it's still king, but actually over the years, farmers have such technology now and big equipment that actually, to the detriment of drainage, they've sort of leveled off some of that good local drainage that actually would help retain some of the waters that now flow south and flow onto the highways. And so you can't find the old laterals that existed. But that's just a sign of technology improving one thing at the cost of another. So we have to have good engineering to be vigilant about that, to be vigilant in our time that these projects will take a long time. I have drainage boards that tell me now, oh, you go into all these meetings, Bill, you're the chairman of the board over there, and you don't have one project for us. But eventually, we will all benefit by a master plan for watersheds and good watershed management. And that's what we're trying to do and will do with your continued support. And it's really the only hope for us to have some solutions. And your input, like Mr. Harrell said, are very important, because where you're flooding, where you're seeing impacts to things that are not accomplished, we can't see everything all the time. So we've got to get together. You got to let us know. We'll try to address it through this planning. And because we have worked together and we are concerned about downstream, like Guy said, that's why, as I look back in history, because since I was growing up and my dad worked all those years at the Soil Conservation Service, there has been no money now flowing through that fund. And really that category in funding, it's PL something, and maybe our friend at the Corps might know it, but it's still an open line in the budget that's not funded. And we need funding for those kind of projects so that we can, have something to match to. Of course, the new match that they're talking about, which the Corps had shed on us, was kind of a flip of what it used to be 80-20. It's still 80-20, but it's flipped over. But we'll try to convince them to stay, that we can't fund 80%, but we could maybe fund the 20. But that's something to be debated. But it takes a long time, so don't give up. Don't, you hear a lot of words tonight, you'll continue to hear a lot of words, and if you go to a lot of meetings, and you should, if you die, have someone in your family to continue to come to the meetings, because that's the only way, and I'm serious, that you move the government. You need to still come to the meetings and have your family come, and we need to continue to hear it and make us all in government accountable to the good plan that our professionals, and I see some of them sitting out there, our professional engineers and planners and water resource type people need to insist upon, just as much as we insist upon highways, which we need to improve on that too. So I'm glad to be a cooperating partner. I thank you, Mr. Harrell, for inviting me tonight. I'm proud to be on the Acadiana Planning Commission with people such as Guy and Monique and the other parish presidents. It's been really, I'm blessed to be in a generation where government leaders across parish lines are not looking at the parish lines. They're helping one another and don't want to harm one another with improvements in their own area, but want to be considerate of one another. All of that's good, and it's good kumbaya, but I'm telling you, you gotta believe in it, because if you don't, we've gotta keep this momentum going. This is our only hope, and it shouldn't take a catastrophic event for us to continue to get funding for this kind of effort. We need to have it on a regular funding basis. So, and the Corps, I wanna say to the Corps of Engineers that a lot of things they get blamed for, but a lot of things they did is because we all got together and wanted to do it, or do something about something, and so you have these things you improve, and then they need to be modified, so God bless the Corps, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. And Bill is very right about government. Government is like a wagon with square wheels. The only way you move it is if you push, 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 and that's what y'all are doing. So I'm gonna ask Monique to come up. She's sitting on a $25 million pot that will help this situation. So Monique?
Thank you, Harold. It's not really me, it's them more. So in August, or after August, we worked closely with the Department of Commerce. And one of the things that, and I'm sorry, I'm looking for input, because I have a little presentation.
Oh, you do? Here,
Okay.
look right over there.
Okay. One of the things they did was bring us to the table, the Acadiana Planning Commission. They're a regional body, and they work with the regional bodies in Baton Rouge, at the FEMA offices, and in a lot of the meetings. And oh great, thank you. It became very clear very early that this state, after the BP oil spill, really did master the coast, but not inland waterways. And, Dave Dixon spoke about the last study in 1988, and you heard Bill Fontenot talk about all of the different organizations that used to exist to monitor, maintain, and really collect data on our waterways. I think I've heard him say we have a tremendous amount of data, historical data, on our waterways. There we go.
There you go, and you can hit this button right here. Whoops, 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 whoops. Go right there. There you go. There you go.
Okay. So that goes back to August when we got the 25 million. The other thing that became very clear was the people from Baton Rouge in that region, they were hit dynamically different than we were hit. They had, it was a lot more catastrophic for that region from a housing perspective. We were hit, I guess our issue really, we rose on the issue of flooding and kind of took the lead at that point. And, so I was sitting in these meetings, and my board is made up of 7 of the parish presidents from Acadia, Evangeline, Iberia, St. Landry, Lafayette, St. Martin, and Vermilion parishes. All of those guys get it. Every one of them. It was September of 2016. I asked Pat Forbes, the director of the Office of Community Development, who will be managing all of the recovery money, to come to our meeting. and talk to these guys. And he was blown away because the conversation was very regional. It was very much, if you do this, think about me down south. What about up north? How do we do it as a region? And so very quickly they approached the governor and said, we want to do this as a region. And the governor was very open to that. And so he gave us, these are mitigation dollars, and these dollars don't necessarily go to drainage all over in different parishes. But they made a decision. We were going to try to do two things. One was potentially lower the floodplain. And I have those, well, let me back up a little bit. And the other was to enhance the response. The governor gave us the $25 million. These are the watersheds that FEMA looked at from the floods of 2016. And we had a flood in North Louisiana in the spring, and then we flooded in August. And we're looking at those four basins, the Vermilion, the TECHE, the Upper Marmontel, and the Marmontel. And then we're also looking at how do we interact with the basin. So what we said to the state and to the feds is, we want to look at the whole region. We want solutions for the whole region. And you know what we do with our jurisdictions is we fund them and we say fixed drainage, and sometimes they'll hire a firm and they say, help us find a solution for our parish or our city. I was in a small city in Evangeline Parish, and the mayor was very frustrated because they've cleaned every ditch, they've done everything they could do, and she's still flooding. The problem is probably not in her control. She probably has no legal authority to go fix the problem because it's probably next door. And so how do we back up and start looking at our problems from a regional perspective? And that's what these guys really wanted to do. And so that's the area we're looking at. It touches St. Mary, and actually one of our projects proposed is in Cameron Parish. We had to knock on their door and say, hey, would you consider looking at this project and fixing it so it could help Vermilion and Acadia Parish? You know, but that's the idea, is let's not fix it for one jurisdiction or another. Let's look at it and master our inland waterways. So this is one of our goals, and Mr. Bill talked about this, developing a master plan. And in the ideal world, before we spend one of those dollars, we would have that in place. We don't have time. FEMA has deadlines. GOSEP has been given deadlines by the federal government. The $25 million, they want to know what we want to do with it now. So we have two efforts going. One, we are talking to the state about putting together a very comprehensive stormwater watershed model. And you see that diagram down there, not just on the river or on the rivers in the region, but on the tributaries. So we understand the coulees. We understand how the water is flowing when it gets to Youngsville. You know, it's bigger than just the rivers. It is the entire watershed that we want to look at. The other thing is we don't have a lot of data coming off of our waterways. You heard about the Surrey gauge and you heard about the Keystone Lock gauge. You didn't hear about many others. Some states, if you look at Iowa, they're covered and they have web interface and you can look at water levels all over the state. We don't have that. We haven't mastered our waterways. And so that's one of the key projects we're looking at. The other thing we want to do is develop a process for master planning. How do we come together? How do we coordinate? And so we are working on that. We're emulating, those of you who work with the MPO, that process in a lot of ways. The criteria we're looking at for the $25 million, the big question, upstream and downstream impacts. Environmental impacts, regional impact, HMGP compliance, and project readiness. So those are the things we're looking at right now. We have about 20 projects being proposed, and tomorrow morning we will do the first evaluation and prioritization of those projects. If we go through all of this, we also need to do whatever we can to enhance the response. And the response is that immediate time after a flood. We should not do this if we don't create alert systems, if we don't do what we can to help our first responders in those first few days. What we are talking about is very long-term, like Bill said. So that's a secondary goal, is to enhance the response. This gauge project that's mentioned in there, we're working with UL, and they put together a preliminary map of new gauges. Some flow gauges, some level gauges where they just put a monitor on the bottom of a bridge and it's monitoring the level. The flow gauges are very expensive, and they're expensive to purchase and expensive to maintain, so they can't be everywhere. But we need more, and they need to be strategic. We've met with USGS, we've met with the National Weather Service, we've met with a lot of federal firms or federal agencies that deal with gauges, so we're coordinating with them. This is the preliminary map, and I'm not going to show you detail because we have Imad Habib and Robert Miller from UL who have put this together, and they are going to sit with each of the jurisdictions. Is this where it needs to be? Is this where your and I see Robert smiling. Is this where your problem is? Is this the data you need to be collecting on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, in a flood? And we want to create a web interface for that. That will be a significant part of this project. And so I just gave you this. Now, if you look at the coast, you don't see any new gauges because CPRA has covered the coast with what's called CRIM gauges. And so we get data on the coast. Those coastal parishes have more interaction than we do. And so we are looking to fill that in. And I know there's some intent, if we do it well, the state would like to do this at a statewide level as well. So this is the first step to being able to put a much more effective watershed model together so that when our public works departments in whatever jurisdiction we're in, they have more science, they have more data, they have, in this we also have to survey all of the cross sections. We don't have real solid cross-section data on our waterways today. You know, so our decisions, it's a really good guess what we're doing. Well, it's more than a little bit. I shouldn't say that because I know there's some engineers in the room. And we have some really smart, we really do, and that's one thing I'm learning. We have some really smart engineers in this region. When I go around the state and talk to people, they are well thought of, let me say that. But we would like to have a tool that all of our jurisdictions, whether it's a small city or a big city or a parish, can use. And then we have consistent upstream and downstream information coming and going. This is a timeline of where we've been since the governor gave us that money. And we are close to the bottom. Tomorrow we're going to evaluate the projects at Rosa Parks at 9 a.m. It is open to the public. It's not a public meeting, but there will be a public comment period if you want to come and if you want to learn about which projects were proposed. And then and we actually have we have 20 projects. We have a lot of good projects. And the committee made a decision not to eliminate projects, but to prioritize projects so that when new funds come available, we're ready with the next one. And I think that's what we want in a big master plan, is not what's the one project, but what is it we need to do, and then let's go find the funding piece by piece and put it together. This is kind of a indication of what kind of projects we got. We got a lot of detention and retention projects. I think on short term, with limited, 25 million for the whole region, like I was saying. You put that in perspective, we're not gonna solve the problem for the whole region, but we can hold water. We can hold it in flooding, in flash floods. I don't know that we can really fix August. That's really beyond any of us. But the continuous flooding issues we have, I do think we can address. And so that's it. Tomorrow I can give you a list of recommended projects.
Thank you so much, Minnie. This is a real victory that Acadiana ended up with this $25 million fund to move forward. One of the most important things is the gauges. That we do have gauges in the system, but not enough to really know what was going on. We have no idea how much water went down the Bar Pit Canal over these two 500-foot dams. And we can only guesstimate maybe a 500,000 surface acre feet went down that. But we should have gauges that monitor that so we can manage it and deal with it. So anyway, our next speaker, Donald Segrera. I don't know if you want to make comments, he's certainly here for questions. Donald is head of the TECHE VERMILION project, very successful water quality project, very well managed, and these guys actually have their feet in the water. They are involved in it every day, and they monitor it, their own system of gauges, and they're very much involved. Their mission is water quality, but they invariably get involved in flood control. And one of the most important things they did during this flood was open their gate at the TECHE Lake Canal that saved New Iberia and St. Mary Parish from flooding. So these people are actually involved and taking part of it, and certainly would be a part of any future plans for gates and controls. Donald.
Thank you, Harold. Dave covered our project very well. We spent a day in the field with us, and we gave he and Harold, I think Dr. Kemp was there that day, gave them a tour of the pump station and our structures, so he has a good understanding and did a good job, and thank you for the presentation and the explanation of how the system works. We do, as Harold said, we do have people in the field every day. We do monitor the elevations. We have gauges set up right now, and they're mainly camera gauges that we actually read staff gauges, and we record this data every day. So our intention had been to upgrade these gauges and add quite a few gauges to the system that we're monitoring right now. But whenever we have been working with the parish presidents and Acadian Planning Commission since the beginning. We've attended all the meetings, and our district definitely wants to be a part of this project of improving drainage in the district, because it goes along with the flow that and the things that we do. So we understand that the things that we would do to improve our gauges could be used as cost share for the larger project. So what we're hoping to do is to combine our efforts with Acadian Planning Commission and the parish presidents, and so that we can have a gauge project that we will be able to participate in, because we will be also gaining a lot of information from that project in managing the flow of water, especially when it's not raining, which is mainly what we do. But I will be around. We have some maps that I brought in. One of the maps shows all of the features of our project, where the pump station is, where the different structures are. If anyone wants to ask me questions or to go over this after the meeting, I'll be glad to do that with you. But I'm very, very happy for the effort and all of your efforts tonight, and coming out and showing your public support. One last comment. The project, the TECHE VERMILION project, and a lot of people talk about it. You know, how would we get such a project today? You know, this was all done back in the 60s. I often review all of the old archives that we have in our office that has a lot of newspaper clippings of what was going on whenever TECHE VERMILION was trying to get funded. And there was a tremendous uniform effort between all of the parishes at the time. The same thing that is starting to happen now. All of the parishes were pulling together, the civic organizations, the professional organizations. They all were in big support of the project. And this is the way that we encourage the federal government to support it. So I encourage everybody to stick with this effort. And I think it can grow. It's not, and Monique has said many times, we don't want it to limit it to this $25 million. We want it to continue to grow to where we can have a whole watershed that is functioning properly. So thank you very much. And,
Thank you so much, Donald. Somebody else with their feet in the water is Dr. David Sheremy, the director of the by Vermilion District. Another body like that Vermilion, it is funded by the taxpayers through property taxes. So
All right, thank you, Harold. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I'm very excited to see so many people showing up for this because I'm really excited about the bayou because I grew up on the Bayou Lafouche. And yeah, I mean, right off the highway. And I remember when I was a young boy growing up in the 60s, whenever we'd get a strong south wind and a high tide, the water would come over onto the road. Then one day our town people got together, let's build a seawall. So we built a little seawall. If you go through Golden Meadow, don't drive 31. The speed limit's 30, you know that. It keeps the water on the other side of the, in the bayou. But what it does is also, after that, we realized the people in Galliana, just north of us, started flooding on the outside of the levee. So we have to be very careful. Any little thing you do on one part of the watershed is going to affect the other. So I'm really applauding this coordinated effort, you know, Guy and Bill and everybody else behind this, Monique, to understand the importance of this coordinated effort. Because as we keep saying, and you've probably heard this before, I'm going to say it again, the water doesn't know where the parish line starts and ends. Okay, yeah, but our houses are somewhere on those lines, and our houses are getting the water. As far as what we do at Vermilion District, we are more concerned with water quality. As you probably know, our main focus right now is on the three of the main impediments to water quality in the bayou: fecal coliform, turbidity, and dissolved oxygen. And we have projects in place right now to make the water quality itself much better. And our goal is within the next few years to make it safe for what we call primary contact, which means you could actually swim in the bayou. And that's really our goal, and hopefully we'll get that in the next few years through some of our projects. But also we also monitor the river. We have there are actually 4 gauges on the Vermilion right now. The one we talk about the most is the Surrey Street, which is near our offices at Vermilionville. And we hear a lot about, and Rob's always talking about our Vermilionville gauge, and we love it when Rob mentions Vermilionville and our gauge there, the Surrey Street Bridge. But we have other ones. We have another one at Lake Martin Bridge, one at E. Broussard Bridge, and another one at the Arnaville Bridge also. So you can see the water height when it comes into the parish, middle point as it's going in and out of Lake Martin, and as it again enters out toward the south side of the parish at the E. Broussard Bridge. So we already have the genesis of this project in place, and hopefully continue. And we're working with USGS also for the Surrey Street, so we can perhaps collect more data also to help this project go forward. But as I just wanted to say, thank you everybody for your enthusiasm for this project. I know it's important for the economic future of this area, because we plan on living here for a long time, and hope our children and grandchildren continue living here. But when you think about what happened in August of 2016, and then when you think about this little rain event they called Harvey over in Houston, okay? Don't even think about it. If that had stopped over us, we wouldn't be here right now, and you know that in your heart of hearts. We would not be here, or half of us would be gone. So maybe you can't prepare for 30 inches of rain, but it's something that's happening more and more, and we have to be ready whenever the regular rain a few inches fall upon us. Because I did see the river shoot up 5 feet in a couple of hours this past Saturday, but it went back down. But it's taking its time. Something is happening. I've only been on this job for 7 years, so I've been watching the river closely. Things are changing. The guys, our bayou crew, are out there every day, cleaning up the bayou, taking stuff out, taking trees out from the bridges to allow the water to flow as much as possible. They're telling me that things are changing on the river. It's not the river's not reacting the way it used to. So it's time for us to step up, be proactive about it, coordinate our efforts. And we'll see tomorrow. I looked at some of the projects that they've had. I'll get a link to everything that was going up, and they have some very exciting things coming up. And a lot of it is right in the vein of what we've been talking about here tonight. So thank you very much. I look forward to working more with you all.
thank you, Dr. Sherman. Somebody who really knows a lot about this and has worked with us over the years and has been with LSU as a professor in hydrology and engineering is Dr. Paul Kemp. Paul, give us some of your thoughts.
Oh, thank you very much, Harold. Actually, I'm not an engineer. I'm an oceanographer, river person, coastal person, right? But what I don't get over to across the basin that often. Harold invites me, and had the pleasure of sitting down with Monique not too long after the the flood here. We had a pretty big flood over in the Baton Rouge area, and also we've been dealing with a lot of, I'm a commissioner on the Flood Authority in New Orleans, and that's, talk about some issues there. But every time I come back, I see progress. And, you know, first thing was the parish presidents coming together the way they did. That doesn't always happen. That's a very unique thing. And then the governor, I was here when the governor came through, and now you have actually identified funds and projects. This is, you know, I was thinking when Bill was talking about how this is generational in terms of time, I was thinking this is moving at warp speed almost. That this is really very quick. I looked at the focus on the gauging and the modeling. I mean, one thing that you know, we hear a few things like on the Vermilion about putting up the bulkheading and how that causes problems somewhere else. We have a lot of levees in this area, and one thing we know is the levee is always built with the protected side on one side and the unprotected side on the other side. But like water doesn't really see the parish boundaries, it also doesn't know what side of the levee it's supposed to be on. And so some of what you're going to be doing is you do have this sort of unusual opportunity to actually use the Atchafalaya Basin as a flood relief outlet for you, and I think that is going to be turn out to be pretty important. The other thing is that when I looked at the specific gauge rise over time, that suggests that there's something going on in the probably in the developed areas in Lafayette that is causing it. We see it all over the place wherever a lot of development is occurring. And so it's clear that the ordinances covering detention and retention are not actually doing everything that we need them to do. So there's something else that needs to happen there. And I because you have this regional approach, I have some confidence that you'll figure that out. And so anyway, in some ways, when I talk to people in other places, I say, you ought to see what they're doing over here. And it's great to see that coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And the real guy that's been a part of this, Mark Wingate is a friend of Acadiana, and first met him in '93 during the '93 flood, when the water at Surrey Bridge got to about 15.7. It flooded a bunch of homes. And Mark was a new engineer with the Corps of Engineers who quickly became a friend of mine and have watched him progress. But he set up, and I'll let you all share, he set up a study of the bayou itself. I think they hired Chance and Associates to do the field work, and they looked at the TECHE and the dam and the Cypress Island swamps. So he's been very much a part of it. His project was pretty much shot down by a sheriff in St. Martin Parish. Most of the project was in St. Martin Parish. In fact, the sheriff disliked it so much, he almost put Mark in handcuffs and brought him to jail. So Mark, welcome, a real friend to Acadiana.
You got to get out of jail.
Thanks, Mr. Scheffler. You know, there's a lot of things I'll probably remember over my career, but I will never forget that sheriff coming after me. In 1995, when I said something about that Keystone Lock and Dam, and we're going to just take that thing down, and I quickly learned when I went to the jail the next day that probably was not going to happen. You know, it really is a pleasure to be here tonight. When I first started working at the Corps, my first project was to work on the Lafayette flood control study. Now, some of you I recognize. You may not recognize me because I had a lot more hair back then. It was probably thinner back then. But it really is a pleasure to be here tonight. Mr. Scheffler called me a few days ago and said, hey, Mark, don't know if you have any folks in your office available to attend this meeting. It's a small group meeting. I said, hey, I looked at the calendar. I said, I'm free tonight. I'll come on out myself and Deron Elsie, my deputy. So I did not realize, wow, what such a turnover. But again, my name is Mark Wingate. I work at the Corps of Engineers out of New Orleans. Yes, I cut my teeth on Lafayette. Today I'm the senior civilian at the Corps, and Deron Elsie is my deputy. Mr. Fontenot said, Parish President Fontenot said he's used to getting beat up a little bit at drainage studies, so I can tell you, you're in good company. So the Corps has certainly taken its abuse or challenges, but we're probably, much of it was deserved. So really came here somewhat in a listening mode here tonight because I really did not know what to expect. So again, it certainly is a pleasure to see friends back. But a couple of things that I thought about as folks were talking. Certainly from a Corps perspective, we think it's very important that if this thing is going to continue to move, I do think you need to look at a regional large-scale project. I mean, that's a given, whether you call it watershed study, master plan, for a comprehensive solution, that is certainly something that we would recommend. I've also heard here tonight we got to be careful because there are unintended consequences. We know that. We can impact downstream, upstream. That's why it's so important to look at it, complete the analysis, and make sure that we've really got it right. But what I'd also suggest is really doing the engineering, and no disrespect to my fellow engineers out there, that's really the easy part of the solution is coming up with the engineering solution. The tough part, as we all know, is finding the funds. Where are the dollars? In '93, Mr. Scheffler mentioned we were running the study. Gosh, when I was standing back in the hall and saw the 4-part plan, that brought back memories all the way back in the 90s. We talked about that. In fact, I called it the Mr. Scheffler plan, I believe, back then. Some of those pieces draining water through Bayou Tortue Swamp, right south of the Keystone Lock and Dam, taking advantage of the head changes. So my point there is, I think we know a lot of the solutions, but where are the dollars really going to come from? From the federal level, it is a very, very competitive business to find the dollars. I hate to say that, but that's the truth, and I want to be transparent. I heard Amite mentioned earlier. I heard the Comite River Diversion mentioned earlier. Morganza to the Gulf, West Shore Lake Pontchartrain, Southwest Coastal. These are all projects just in the New Orleans footprint, about $30 billion of need that I'm waiting on the first dollar to come. Okay, so that's this kind of sobering fact. The Corps of Engineers nationwide has a $100 billion backlog. So I got $100 billion of projects waiting, and now we're going to bring on new projects every year. So Congress, the Corps, the administration at the federal level is wrestling with that. How do we as a nation invest in infrastructure? But as I also heard here tonight, these are generational projects. Because if we don't do it today, I can promise you it won't be done tomorrow. So you do have to keep pushing. The Greater New Orleans Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction. Dr. Paul mentioned that. That's a $14.7 billion investment. That would not have received the $14.7 if it had not been started in the 1950s. So it is generational projects. I've come to find out we are doing these projects not for us, but for our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But with that said, you've got a great opportunity with the $25 million. So as I see it, you've got kind of what do we do in the interim? And then you got the long-term solution. So kind of jot it down. So how can the Corps help? I think on the interim solution, you've got your monies. You've come up with your plans. From a Corps perspective, we can certainly help with the permitting arena. That may come as a surprise. Folks will tell you the Corps of Engineers takes forever to get permits, and we probably do. But I will commit to you, if you have a plan, let's set up pre-application meetings. Before you're even ready to come in with the paperwork, let's get together, figure it out. We can get pluses and minuses, try to steer you so we can be in a position to issue the permit. In terms of how can we help with the long term, once the great flood of August 2016 hit, I believe the parish presidents all got together, Durand and some other guys came down to those meetings. We have been expressing capability. That's a term we use within the federal government, seeking dollars for the budget process. We express a capability. So we have been expressing capability to begin this large watershed study from the federal perspective. If those dollars will show up, we will continue to do so as long as the parish presidents want us to do that piece. So we're here for that. One other comment. So at 8 o'clock tonight, State of the Union address comes on. I'm very interested in what the president's going to say because he's going to be talking about infrastructure, and that's what we're speaking about here tonight. President Fontenot, I think it was you who mentioned the 2080, 80-20 flip, and what he's really talking about there is traditionally the federal government brings the majority of the money to the table on infrastructure projects. I'm very interested in how the president will talk about it. What you've read in the paper on his infrastructure plan is really pushing those decisions down to the state and local level. Okay?
self-help, more local and state involvement with some level of federal engagement. So we need to stay tuned to that, and I think this is a great project because you've already got some dollars that you're going to try to move. And I certainly wish you the best, and we're here to help, whether it's short-term, long-term, or intermediate. And again, Mr. Scheffler, thank you so much for having me back here tonight.
Thank you. We're not going to put you in jail, Mark. All right, I want to recognize Jared Prundy, who is Congressman Clay Higgins, I guess staff officer here in Lafayette. Jared, you want to stand up and be recognized? In about a 30-minute, 40-minute phone conversation with Congressman Higgins, we talked a lot about this issue. And by the way, he lives in Port Barre, and I think he can throw a rock into Bayou Catawba. So he's very familiar with the area and its problems. But he's very committed to this issue. He knows how important it is to the area. And Congressman Higgins is our link with the Corps, with the federal agencies. And he's a very willing listener, and he wants to hear from grassroots. And he asked that we set up this public meeting. So at his request, we're following through on that, and hopefully Jared will report to him about the success and that turnout and so forth. So we'll open up for questions now. I want to recognize also Acadiana Open Channel, who's filming this and will be broadcasting it at future times. So you can direct a question to any one of the panel members. Okay.
Mr. Howell, before you do that, I see a lot of elected officials in the room, and if you just raise your hand, I just want to thank y'all for coming. Mostly a lot of Lafayette folks are here. We got some St. Martin folks, we got Vermilion folks, we got some Iberia folks. Thank y'all for coming out. We appreciate that, taking time out of your busy schedule. And I just want to remind you before we start questions, the guy that walked in, I didn't see him walk in because of his, and I love talking about this because of his height statue. He's my favorite weatherman because two reasons. He's the best looking one, and second, I feel like a king when I'm around him. But this is really all Rob Perillo's fault, because when I went to bed on August 15th, the last thing he said was, we're probably gonna get about 8 to 10 inches of rain, but if it stays on top of us, this could be bad. And I went to bed thinking about it could be bad, and at 4 o'clock in the morning when the rain started falling, I wanted to call him and say, how bad is it going to be? And he didn't even predict it. So again, thank you for coming, Rob. You've been a help to all of us as well.
Thank you, Don. Bill.
Since Guy recognized all the public officials, I don't want to be remiss in saying that so many mayors have called us to support what we're doing, and council persons on the parish level and the mayoral level. And I want to say tonight on the way here, I had a call from Mayor Brasso, and many times I can just jump a stream and I'm in Lafayette Parish and I'm in his town because we're that close. So Mayor Carencro said that he's not here tonight because he's going to stay home and watch the president, and he just asked that you please forgive him, but he's fully supporting the plan. So I just wanted to mention that because since Guy recognized him, and he might watch this on AOC, I want to be sure to mention that.
I was supposed to recognize it, but I'm okay with it, man.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to keep all of that straight. You know, political partners, we got to remain friendly. But Mayor Brasso is very supportive and a very good mayor. Thanks.
Hey, and thank all those elected officials that are here, and especially thank all the citizens that are here. I think the most important person in our democracy is a caring citizen, and you all are part of that group. So we'll open up for questions or comments. We certainly welcome ideas.
Yeah, whoever wants to ask a question, let's get a microphone so the other.
Yes. Right there.
Wait, he has a mic already.
Okay, Marshall.
Yes. Am I reading red? Yes, this is directed to Mr. Wingate.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the Vermilion River is deemed a navigable waterway all the way to General Mouton Bridge. Is that correct?
I'll take your word for it. I didn't
Okay,
come
Harold?
with that answer.
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely.
Okay, all right. As a certified navigable waterway, it should have been maintained at a specific width and depth, according to CFR regulations, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Contingent upon receipt of funding.
Contingent upon receipt. Okay, so,
I mean, just to explain that, we have 13 authorized navigation channels in the state of Louisiana within New Orleans District. 13 channels that Congress has authorized us to dredge. Vermilion is one of those 13. Okay? Out of those 13, there are 2 rivers that really receive money, any substantial money to do dredging. And that's because of the importance to the nation. The Mississippi River is going to receive its money, right? And the Calcasieu River. The other channels, it's a very competitive business nationwide to receive dollars on those channels.
but yet, just as a point of fact, the Corps of Engineers is negligent in the fact that they've declared this Vermilion River as a navigable channel, but yet have not fulfilled the responsibilities to maintain it as a navigable river, correct?
I'm not going to say correct that the Corps is negligible on that. I'm going to tell you that we are authorized to do a particular action, and if Congress so chooses or the administration so chooses to fund it, we will then execute that action.
Okay. Well, just as a point of fact, if it wouldn't be for Mr. Tom Elberson, who used to have a boat building business, that was the primary reason that at least the navigability went all the way to the General Mouton Bridge. We'd really be in a problem if he wasn't in the boat building business way back when. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that bit of history. He did demand that a lift bridge be built at Pinhook because of his boat building operation. So, real important point of history. Yes, next.
I got the microphone. No, a couple things. You're talking a lot about how much money you want to spend and what things cost and everything. Well, when I first sort of came in contact with Harold, he enlightened me on some of the numbers involved here. And roughly $400 million was spent fixing 4,000 flooded homes in Lafayette Parish from the 2016 flood. And 40% of those houses had less than a foot of water in them. So ipso facto, if you could have lowered the flood stage of the Vermilion River by a foot, you would have saved $160 million. I mean, and last time I heard, FEMA operates a national flood insurance program, and all that money came from the feds to fix things. So I don't know why it's, I don't want to be critical or anything, but we're hearing all this about how, man, it's really tough to get money. Well, it's going to cost a lot more if this happens again, and you got to blow another $500 million. And when you could have, just by lowering the stages a foot, you would have saved $160 million. So, we can't come up with $50 million or whatever it takes to do these 3 regional-based projects. I mean, that's somehow got to enter into the calculus in somebody's mind somewhere.
I would have to agree with you. It's common sense, right? But they don't operate like that. And I got to give props to Governor John Bell Edwards because I've been in government 18 years, so I've seen my share of storms. But we got some money to mitigate hurricanes Gustav Ike, and the rules show that we can spend some of that money, and a lot of it was spent mostly in Vermilion Parish, not a whole bunch in my parish, to lift homes. And I want to tell you a real life story that happened to me. So we got money to lift homes, but we had an area that had flooded at that particular time in Lower St. Martin. We had only 8 people that were eligible for this funding, and of the 8 people that were eligible, only 4 qualified. So we lifted 4 homes. We had a flood in March of this year, just a high water event. In May of this year, high water event. Those 4 homes in a subdivision with 200 homes in it, those people were sitting on their front porch with their legs crossed in their rocking chairs, drinking coffee, and the other 196 homes were sandbagging to save their homes. It seems like we could have taken the $1 million it cost us to lift 4 homes and spend that $1 million to do a project that would impact the whole subdivision. So what Governor Edwards said was, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to look at projects that have an impact on an area. And that's why I think that's why he said, let's give Acadiana $25 million to at least start. we know, I mean, my conversations with Monique over the last couple of days, we're probably gonna have about $100 million worth of applications for 25 million. But we're not throwing any applications out. We're just gonna put them we're gonna rank them in an order that we feel that can impact the region as a whole. Because what I've seen in the past in dealing with all these storms is they give you an initial pot of money and they say, okay, go ahead and get started. And Governor Edwards asked for about $3 billion for the August 16 flood. He got 1.6 billion, and I'm gonna call it like I see it. Congressman Higgins was very instrumental in getting that 1.6 billion down to us and our senators as well. And if you haven't been paying attention to the news or you're watching TV, they're having trouble getting rid of the 1.6 billion dollars because they're begging people, they're begging businesses and homeowners to come and apply for the funding if you flooded. Because we probably gave away, and I'm just using rough numbers here, we probably gave away about $1 billion, but it's still about 600 million. So what we think is gonna happen is that, because a lot of homeowners, you said it, you said $400 million worth of damage, right? I can tell you that the federal government didn't pay homeowners insurance paid a lot of it. You know, people had, some people had flood insurance. In my parish, 80% of the people did not have flood insurance that flooded. But at any rate, we feel like there's gonna be some more dollars coming behind that, just based on traditional, the way it has happened in the past, and at least in my 18 years of service. So we hope to be able to take that money and not do those things, like you said, just one at a time, but use the money and stretch it out for the region as a whole.
Mr. Cormier, with all due respect, the full 400 million came from the federal government because the National Flood Insurance Program is a federal program, and it's highly subsidized by the government. I mean, I get $350,000 worth of coverage for $400. You couldn't get that at a market rate privately, commercially, anywhere. And I don't mean to be argumentative at all, sir.
Right. Well,
another point I want to make is this: everything that Harold and Dave talked about, Bayou Catawba, Cypress Island Swamp, well, not necessarily Cypress Island Swamp, and the Vermilion River. All those problems that are causing flooding are from man-made activities. And we hear a lot of talk about, well, we don't want to do this because we might have some unintended consequences. Well, we're living with the consequences of what we did before. And what they're saying is, just figure out a way to undo them temporarily when we need to get to stop putting water on top of us and getting it back into the basin. So, you know, I mean, it's frustrating to hear a lot of, oh, gee, we can't do this, we can't do that, we don't know what's going to happen. Well, we know what did happen because we did that, so let's just reverse it for a little while.
Right.
You know, take the drain out of the tub and drain some water out.
Right. I'm not a pessimist by any means, and I fully support that. But let me tell you this, I'm also a realist. If the basin, we don't know when the storm would have happened. In 2011, we had to open up the Morganza because they had so much water in the basin. So if the basin was at 25, let's say 22 feet, we couldn't have opened up a structure to drain the Catawba in it. The opposite would have happened. We'd have flooded ourselves. So, but again, maybe 50% of the time the water. I was getting calls during the storm, and people were saying, and from Lafayette saying, there's a structure down in St. Mary Parish, same kind of structure. They need to open it up because the basin was low at the time. So I called the parish president in St. Mary Parish, who I'm very close to, and said, can you go check it out? If there's a head right there, we go to the structure. In 2011, the Corps engineer made a decision to weld the structure closed. So we had to cut it open. But if we'd have cut it open, the water, at least at that point, was 2 inches higher in the basin than it was on our side. So we'd have been putting more water on us. But the general public was telling me, go open it, go open it, go open it. Let's go put some water in the basin instead. So all I said was, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. We gotta study these things to make sure that we don't have negative impact, that we don't open that structure and the water comes the wrong way.
Right. During the 2011 flood, the water level in the basin at Catawba was 24. During the flood of 2016, the water level on our side was 30. So even during that maximum flood, we had a 6-foot head, we could have drained it. And of course, those numbers can change a lot. You know, we can go much higher than 24, but we do have the advantage that the basin is controlled and that the water level can be shut off at the top Henderson is controlled with a gate that St. Martin Parish runs. They keep Henderson at +10. And so in anticipation of a flood, the St. Martin Parish could open that gate and lower those stages and accelerate evacuation of water. Now that project comes under a Corps of Engineers basin plan project of the 80s. They realized it's called the Catawba drainage plan, flood plan, and it was reported on in a Mississippi River Commission report that Dave dug up in 2007. The project to dump Catawba waters into the Chapala Swamp was not done because at that time it didn't meet the cost-benefit analysis. Of course, what has changed that cost-benefit, and by the way, this project is still open to implementation, and it is 100% funded by the Corps through the Basin Plan, and all we have to do is revisit, and I hope Congressman Higgins encourages the Corps to do the cost-benefit analysis again, entering all the numbers of the flood. So you put those numbers on, this project was proposed at $20 million project. It might have saved part of that $400 million of our tax dollars to deal with flooded homes. So this is the type of thing our Congress can push and encourage. The Corps is already funded. It doesn't need any money. We just need to push the square wheel wagon and make it roll. So, questions? Yes. Marshall.
Hi, my name's Marshall Broussard. I'm a Sierra Club member, and I've heard Harold's. It should be.
Here.
Thanks, Harold. I've heard Harold speak many times on water issues and speak directly concerning the fine reputation of Dr. Paul Kemp. And I have some inputs that I would like everyone to consider in these terms. While we have a Corps of Engineers, that means engineering, and it leads to a huge discussion of funding and so forth. I would like to see a Corps of Scientists, headed by Dr. Paul Kemp, studies, who examine this issue from a science point of view in two major ways. One, we live in a state with a disappearing coast. We live in a state more polluted than we want to talk about. So, I'm urging that we consider, in terms of dredging, especially the Vermilion, that we find out whether there are sands connected to the aquifer, whether what we dredge is already polluted to the extent that we'll just send it downstream and hurt things in the environment. And as I lose my train of thought, I'd like to say and congratulate Harold and Dave and Monique and Guy, all the whole dang panel, because it is a very moving thing to say. Oh yeah, I remember now. One more thing. Thank you, Monique, for pointing out the spread of the necessary studies. And a lot of people are going to say, hey, are we going to spend money on studies or projects? So let's consider that in everything we do. If the studies are already there, then there's no need to go back and study it and invest more money on it. So we can do a literature search. Thank you. A literature search even would probably help all of this a lot. And so the other thing I want to recommend to you is that you bring in the climate change people. This was, how many people here who got flooded think this is a part of climate change worldwide? How many inches of rain did we get in that period? It was 55 inches. 5 inches. When was the last time we got that much rain? I believe it was back in the 40s, and it wasn't 55, it was less. So, we have a disappearing coast, and in my opinion, a rising sea, and a 50-year prediction on the part of some people of as much as a 23 to 30-foot rise in the level of the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that climate change And the oncoming Gulf needs to be considered in all projects. We need to be looking, just as this panel has said, to the future. The future is 2050. It's not tomorrow. So I would ask, in support of all this project, that we immediately prioritize what can help us if this happened tomorrow.
Thank you.
And go from there.
Thank you, Marshall.
Good job.
Dr. Kinson.
Okay, I have a simpler comment, really. I heard a comment a while ago that said if we lowered the river by a foot, we would have saved a lot of houses that only took 11 inches. This forgets that we have two things going on. We have flooding on the upland areas, like where we stand now, and we have flooding along the Vermilion. And what I've heard here tonight is an approach to dealing with the flooding along the Vermilion and the houses there, but it will have no influence on the flooding of places like over near Como High School, which are well above the river. So we have to remember those places, and I don't know whether this $25 million is totally dedicated to river-type projects, the regional river and drainage, or whether some of that can be directed to this, what I call upland flooding.
Right.
And if you look at a cost-benefit ratio, things can be done very quickly in the upland area, albeit most of them actually put water into the Vermilion faster. But it's a problem we live with. And I think they need to consider the cost benefit between all of the houses that are on the upland areas versus all of those that flood that are along the river, and see what can be done with the amount of money we have.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. But let me just explain that the 400 million was not just along the Vermilion River, it was the Vermilion watershed. But it goes back to the comment I made earlier. There's two types of floods, and we experienced them both during the 16 event. There's a flash flood that happens, and you get water in your home, and 2 days later it's gone, in the upland areas like you called it. And then there's backwater flooding, like in my case, people had water in their homes for 38 days. I will tell you that the 25 million, after breezing through the applications at the first time we did this a couple weeks ago, there's a lot of retention detention. That's all in the upland area. So that's when I say uplands, you know, there's probably a lot of folks in here around Youngsville that live around Youngsville. They've already done the city of Youngsville has already done some of their own retention expansion, and they've identified that they can lower the flood stage just in certain subdivisions by a foot or so. So the 25 million is going to be really used for both. What we get beyond that, any funding we get beyond that, again, we're going to rank all these projects. I think you're going to see, from a perspective of how we spend the money, you calling it upland or bottomland flooding, we'll be spending it in both areas.
You raise a very important point. And if you look at Broussard area, that's pretty high. It's roughly around 30 feet. And if you go about 18 miles to the south to Highway 14, you're at about 12. And so that land slopes significantly, but if you look at it, you think it's flat as a pancake. So if you put a road across and you put it 2 or 3 feet above grade without adequate drainage, then you're flooding someone. So it's important. LIDAR technology can be a great help in identifying those spots where we need to do a lot better job on these upland flooding areas. We can fix that, I think, with modern technologies. So thank you for raising that point.
I think Rob.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to get ready to go back to the 10 o'clock news, but just wanted to make a comment about, I raised my hand for the climate change thing. And it's not so much because of the sea level rise, but what we have observed, not what we're predicting, but what we observed over the last 20 years is a definitive increase in the intensity and frequency of these heavy rain events. So this August rainfall event, when we look back at, oh, well, that was a 300 or 400 or 500-year storm, it may not be anymore. It may be an 80-year storm or a 100-year storm. So there are things that we're seeing that are definable right now. And one of the issues I have in a more urban setting and why my house flooded is because of the development that continues, commercial development in Lafayette that is, I'll take the plus. But the commercial development here is just mandated for a 10-year retention. Costco built to a 20-year retention, but those 10-year rainfalls are coming every 5 years, and those 5-year rainfalls are coming every other year. Just look at the number of flooding stories that we've done over the last couple of years. So a comprehensive approach to how we continue to develop. And I think we're fortunate enough that we have green spaces to work with. New Orleans and Houston, they are in a really sorry state. But what we need to do is not only build for stronger and longer flood return periods, but consider those return periods on the flood. They're much more frequent than what they used to be, and we have seen that. And I raised my hand because I had 2 inches of water in my house. And these tropical events now are at least 10% stronger than what they used to be. So you take a 25-inch rainfall, take 10% of that, that's the 2.5 inches of water in my house. Now that's kind of an interesting way to just talk about the increase in the atmosphere, the warmth in the atmosphere, where we've seen 17 of the last 20 years have been the hottest years on record. And whatever you think what's causing that warmth, we're observing that warmth, and a warmer atmosphere holds more water, and thus it's a very easy forecast to predict that we are going to have similar floods and more frequent floods, and perish the thought that we have a Harvey here, but it is certainly a distinct possibility in our lifetime. So again, we have to build to these more stringent runoff, because once you get past these 10-year or 20-year retention ponds, it's just running back into our subdivisions. And over the last several decades, we've noticed within the parish that we've been reticent on accepting Corps of Engineers studies on adoption of where the actual flood zones are within the FEMA maps. We are still waiting on final approval, and people like most of us that may have flooded already we're pretty much not going to be able to recuperate from that. But for future people on how we build and where we send our water, I think that it's really great to see that we have this group here working together, and it's going to have to be a multi-parish approach. But also, when we're talking about rainfall and return periods, we have to build for much more. We need to start thinking about 500-year return periods and building for that when it comes to any more commercial development, because anything outside of that will continue to worsen the problem here. And one more thing I'm just going to add, and I do have to run. When we're doing the river gauges, I think it would be really smart to have rainfall gauges there as well. This way you'll know what's getting into your river basins before the rivers actually come up, and cameras are very important as well, as you can physically see how areas are doing, and I think that's a very good point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments, Rob. Yes.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned you wanted our recommendations. I don't have a recommendation, but you talked about dredging the Vermilion River to remove some of the shoaling. Do you think that would be would we see, in your professional opinion, would that be like an immediate result? Would that give us immediate relief for this problem? And also a question for Monique, and speaking of the projects and the $25 million, can I have more information about what's going on tomorrow at Rosa Parks, I think you said? I don't have that information, thank you.
We'll let you go first, Mr. Howell, and answer her first question.
Okay.
We'll answer her second.
Dave probably can answer this better because he's done the historical research. We had major flood problems after the levees were built. We dredged the bayou to 100 by -10, all the way to the Onslow Butte Railroad Bridge. Now, I was a kid living in the country and riding bareback horses and kind of watched this dredge. So it's part of my personal history. We lived on the Vermilion all the time. But after it was dredged, we didn't have a major flood event for 59 years. So to say it certainly would help at lower stages if we dredge And this is maintenance dredging, just bring it to the design depth that it was really dredged in 1950.
Yeah, I need
Dave?
to comment on that too. You know, just to bring y'all back to remember what I presented, we had 3 major floods in the 40s. And that's probably what led to the dredging of the river and the installation of those gates on Bayou. So, I mean, I hope we don't have to have 3 major floods before we fix it again.
And by the way, the Corps has been aware of this problem. They've been kicking this can down the road a long time. There were 1 million acres drained into Bayou, according to the TECHE Vermilion data and engineering research they've done. And that, historically, probably 99% of it went into the Champlain River. Now it comes down to Bayou Teche. It all has to come down to Bayou Teche, and some trickles down to Vermilion. So this is something that nature didn't intend for Bayou Teche and Vermilion to carry the Catawba watershed. This was something the Corps should have dealt with 80 years ago. They should have known they had a problem draining it down the Bayou Teche because it has a dam on it. So that forces all down to little bitty Vermilion. That is what is bringing us those astronomical levels. And just some numbers. The high water for Lafayette is 24 feet. The high water for Morgan City is 10.5. The high water for Morgan City is 10.6. The high water for New Iberia is about 12. So what is the problem with the Vermilion? We are all Highway 90 communities, and we are double New Iberia, 2.5 times Morgan City, 2.5 times Mermentau. This is a problem here that should have been tended to when the levees were built and that 1940 flood hit us with this astronomical 24-foot level.
And I just want to back up what Mr. Howard and Dave did. I actually got in a boat as well. Right after the event, the water was at 10 feet. So I wish we'd have hooked up because we could have all rode together. But I started at the Onslow, not even in my parish, but I started at the Onslow Butte Bridge, which is in my parish. And I drove all the way to Abbeville in my son's sophisticated bass boat. And I saw what they saw. It would be 10 feet, then it would start rising, 6, 5, 4, 3. I don't know if the guy who lives across from Rotary Point's here, but you go during low water stage, they got a delta building in this guy. He built his bulkhead probably years ago, and during low water, his bulkhead he'd have to walk to his boat probably 40 feet to get to it because that's how much dirt has built up with I don't remember the name of the canal that comes in right there by Rotary Point.
Coulee-Mean.
Coulee-Mean.
It's Coulee-Mean cut off. Yep.
Just common sense will tell you that. And so Monique will tell you about what we got going on tomorrow.
And the concrete coulees are designed with a 2% grade. They drop 2 feet per 100 feet. And that's so they retain no sediment. That carries the current at 10 miles an hour. It's like rapids you see in Montana and Colorado. So no sediment, there's no mud in Coulee-Mean. You can go look at it. When it's dry, there's no mud. It all lands in the Vermilion. And over time, it just races the Vermilion, and the Vermilion doesn't have a 10-mile-an-hour current to carry it away. It piles up. And one of the things we ask, and Congressman Higgins asked of the Corps, 2, 1, maintenance dredge of Vermilion to the design depth. It's not a big thing. You only have a few spots that are a problem. Most of it is, and this was in 1990, one of my Eagle Scouts did a project to measure the depth of the Vermilion from Orneville to the General Mouton Bridge, the non-navigational part, because parish at the time was considering dredging it because there was a perception that it needed dredging. And so with the guidance of the parish engineer, the scouts took a Cajun depth recorder, a bamboo pole with a little disc at the bottom, and we physically measured every bridge at the top of it, at the bottom of it, and every 500 feet, and came to the conclusion that the river channel, although it had shifted in places, it still maintained the 400 to 800 square feet capacity. Now, if you did that same measurement at Coulee-Mean, you can walk across it absolutely in knee boots. And so this is a big hill. The actual And the problem is that when you go up from Cooley Mean at Rotary Point and you go to the Pinhook Bridge about 1,000 yards away, you go to 24 feet.
That's right.
And water goes downhill. It's awful heavy. And if you try to do the same thing going south, to get to 10 feet, you got to go past the L.Y. Broussard Bridge. And so it's getting shallow going south, getting deeper going north. And so the problem is in short spaces, in big humps, where it's pouring into it probably from the concrete canals. So it's not dredging 50 miles or 100 miles. The shoal there, as we measured, is about 1,000 feet. And computing, bring it back to contract design depth of 1950, involves about 90,000 cubic yards. Now, if you got the same price to remove it and you taken the spoil out, that a similar project in the basin was charged, Freeport McMoran was charged $10 a cubic yard to take it out. And if you use the same price, you're talking about $900,000 to take this one plug out. I mean, that's a triple. I mean, that is almost nothing. And that's one of the major problems. There are probably other shoal areas. Mm-hmm. Certainly, maybe in Vermilion Parish, as we go past Cooley Isle to Keene, the tugboat guys are complaining they're hitting bottom somewhere along around by Milton. So it's multi-parish, but it's super important that we deal with it, because if it lowers stages a foot and a half, that's very important to those people that had a foot of flood water in their home.
Well, let me make one comment related to that. Ile de Con, I live about a mile north of Ile de Con, right across the street from the river. Okay, Ile de Con is the coulee that demarks Vermilion Parish and Lafayette Parish, and it's a very large coulee. And we think that that's where the water starts to flow north from that point forward. And I think Professor Gary over there, he agrees with that. And Professor Mike Walden, I know he's around here somewhere maybe, he had come up with that theory also after looking at high water marks at the survey that the USGS did after the flood of 16. And one of my neighbors saw that because he went down the river during the flood. And he said it looked like Rocky Mountain Whitewater Rapids at Ile de Con. In fact, it was so turbulent, he turned around and came out. He was scared to go in there. And we saw the water flow backwards Saturday. So right there by my house. So I'm pretty sure that's where it's happening. So that means that the water is higher there when it enters the river there than it is in Cypress Island. It's flowing backwards. Okay, can't go south. So there's got to be some shoals to the south. And the water's hitting the river extremely fast. And for the Lafayette Parish council members that are here, okay, you know, we're talking about cleaning the coulees. Okay, that's just going to make the water hit the river faster. So if we don't fix the problem with the river, we're going to have some, it's going to back up, down back the coulee. You might have the coulee clean and it's going to come right back at you.
Can we hear from Vermilion Parish? We got one of the parish councilmen.
So Harold, let me just quickly touch on tomorrow. So what we did a project submittal request to all of the jurisdictions, and we wanted to do a technical vetting. We wanted to do a technical vetting of the project. And that's what tomorrow is. Each project will be presented, and we'll look at it from a technical perspective. We put criteria together, and each project will be graded, and then we'll prioritize the projects. And
Available for the public to see, like
the public is welcome to come, yes.
specific locations and stuff on the
Yeah, we have it, this map is more interactive, and we had some of the guys in our office actually try to map out the impact areas of the projects. So, yeah, we are trying to communicate, you know, and we've asked the engineers who proposed the projects to actually present them. So it'll be, we have a lot of projects. I think we're gonna present them all, and then we'll open it up for questions at that point. I think it will, we're already scheduling 3 hours, so to fit it all into 3 hours, the questions will come at the end.
Besides going to the meeting, though, how do we find out about what is decided at those meetings? Is there any kind of regular, besides attending the meeting tomorrow, absent that being possible, how does the public find out about what you do, what you decide, and what things will be implemented? Is there any place?
Claire will be there tomorrow. Yeah.
What about the advocate, Acadiana advocate?
Yes, Ben will be there tomorrow as well.
I just have a quick practical question, trying to get back to the practice. Harold did a great job on what's going on. Mr. Wingate, how do you work? How do we proceed from this study, which we've done a pretty good job of studying, to design, engineer's estimate, get Mr. Higgins some kind of numbers that maybe he could work with as opposed to this? I mean, there's no numbers here on the board. It's heard $50 million, I heard $100 million, heard $150 million. I mean, what is it? Why can't we go and do a design phase instead of, and get out of this study phase and get something done? Does that help you? Does that help you?
Right.
Or does that help Mr. Higgins, Congressman Higgins?
Okay.
Mark?
Yeah, let me just give you my quick thoughts and reaction. Doesn't mean it's right, but at least it's my immediate reaction. So as I was up at the podium, I mentioned that, you've got some money right now. All right, so I think you have what I'm looking at as an interim solution. There's some things that you should be able to move forward with right now with the $25 million. I think you've probably done enough study right now probably to point you in the right direction with those dollars. That's what I would hope we'd be in a position to do. But with a longer term plan, now if you're looking to the parish to build that plan, you're going to follow their guidelines. Okay? If they want to do study, design, construction, you need to follow their guidelines. Through the federal government, we have a process. And it's a long process, but it's a very deliberate process. And we go through a study phase, we determine the needs, we determine the full cost, we determine what the benefits are, the impacts, the environmental, the real estate, you name it, we look at that through a study phase. It can be a long process.
Yes, sir, been there.
Okay, let me just finish real quick for the benefit of everybody else. Once that study's complete, that study has to go to Congress for authorization. So it takes another congressional act, because it's really up to Congress and the administration, Office of Management Budget, to determine are they going to fund that project. Just because we complete a study and we point out great recommendations, and even if it is economically justified, it doesn't mean it's going to be funded. That's up to the administration to fund or Congress to support. Then those monies, if the monies come down, then we move into a design and construction phase.
I'm just wondering if we could resurrect your 93 study, and we're not going to put you in handcuffs. But that study is somewhere in your files, and it would certainly benefit us to look at your efforts as a new engineer with the Corps, and maybe get information that benefits from it.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to see if there's another generation doesn't go by before we can
Right.
get something done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now,
I
as
think
far as
it-
value engineering is concerned,
Yeah.
we've done all that. We put our estimates in. They came back to Corps, the Department of Defense, Department of Energy. They come back and they say, no, it can't be $65 million. It can only be $55 million. So you go back and do the value engineering. You get it straightened out, you work hard, and sometimes you get the project to fly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Point well taken. I
Kim,
think
please.
I'm gonna summarize what Mark was trying to say. I think he's saying you're better off giving the money to the locals, so that because we got projects that are shovel ready right now for the 25 million. So instead of their process now, the best thing I heard him say today, and I got to be honest with you, I had a conversation with Congressman Higgins on Friday, who committed that he was going to get this done, is that they're going to streamline the permit process for us. But if they can get us the money, it's easier for the state or the locals to do these projects. It's easier for us to design and implement and go to construction than it is for them. Would you agree to that?
Yes, sir. And the only thing, again, I would add, just reinforce, when you're at the point that you know what you want to construct, if it's required a Corps permit, please call me, President. We will set a meeting up immediately, and we will facilitate that process.
I did that like about 2 months ago with my projects, but anyway.
It didn't help that much.
No, but I mean, I'm ready to go when you are.
Guys, share with us, your parish is already planning a drain into Bayou Teche from the Cypress Island swamp. Share that with us.
Sure. I'll do that real quick, and then we'll get to Kim because I know she has a question. But so one of the projects for the Morrow, well, actually, no, I didn't even put that up as a project for the Morrow. I'm trying to I'm trying to help Youngsville out my project tomorrow, but one of the projects that we have that we're gonna pay for with local taxpayer money is, he keeps talking about draining water south of the Keystone Locks. That's important for Lafayette, it's important for me. So one of the projects we have is an expansion of a channel and a dredging of a channel, much smaller than the Vermilion is, but expansion and dredging of a channel that's gonna assist that to take place. The last time that channel was probably cleaned out was about 1950. Records show that. We had portions of it done in the 70s and 80s, but we are gonna spend our local taxpayer money to be able to get that done. My two biggest cheerleaders are sitting at the end, Dave and Mr. Harold, because they know that it's gonna have an impact on Lafayette. So I'm your biggest cheerleader. I want the Vermilion dredge just as much as you do. That's why I got in a boat myself and went to check it out. Although I wasn't in my parish, I knew that if I can get that water flowing and not stop it in Vermilion Parish, get it to the Gulf of Mexico, that I'm a benefit just as much as you guys do. So Kim, sorry.
Just follow up to, I think it was one of the questions that he had about how the community is going to learn the progress of some of these projects, rather than just waiting to see it in the Daily Advertiser or the Advocate or whatever other newspaper. How about a really good website set up that is going to just show the different processes that are going on, what status each one of the new projects are in?
We can definitely look at doing that, but I will make this note, that 25 million is actually federal money. That's FEMA money. GOSEP has to apply to FEMA for the projects we put forward, and we do have to follow federal processes. We are working at warp speed to determine what to do, but once we actually get into the process, and it's just like transportation, when you're dealing with federal dollars, you have to go through federal processes, and it's longer, it's more expensive, it's more tedious, but it is more comprehensive as well. And these projects they won't be quick. We will move them as fast as we can. I don't know if this is hearing me, but it still will go through a federal process. And we can, Kim, we have something set up for the transportation projects we can just duplicate for these projects as well.
I think it would really help the community to have access when they have the time to check into a website to see where you all are.
And so also with the Gauge project, part of that budget is to develop a web interface for the data coming in. I think long term we all have to look at community education, how we build what Rob was saying, you know. It needs to become a part of our thought processes in everyday development, and we have to think about water differently. And so I think that will be built into all of our efforts as a commission.
Okay, we have a question, Councilwoman Christozan from St. Martin Parish.
Yes, I'm not here to question any of these projects. I think they're gonna work. I really believe, look, if Mr. Harold says it's good, it's gotta be good. I've been listening to him for long enough. He ain't been wrong too many times, so I'm good with that. But I have concerns, and some of the concerns I have is, the district I represent and the district where I was born and raised and where I live. I was from the Cecilia Henderson area, and I also service now. My district runs the Catahoula area. My concern is, we just finished a study, and Mr. Kermit can touch on it if you want, where we just looked at the size of it and how much water can the Catahoula Lake handle. The Catahoula Lake used to be 80 to 100 foot deep. We determined that it's about 22 foot deep at the deepest point, and at that 22 foot, at that 22 foot depth, we're only about 7 foot wide. We drop off to about 3 or 2. My concern is, I think moving these pumps in the Catawba area and diverting water would work good. But my concern is we're gonna be taking on more water than we can handle right now. If we don't work at dredging out Catahoula Lake, and I urge the Corps of Engineers to move quick and to help us with a permitting process, because we do have matching funds from our parish to put into this project. Once you pass Catahoula Lake and you look at where it goes out to Bayou Alexon, we do drop it, we go down to about a 30 foot depth from what we got off of the information. So our retention pond for our area is Catahoula Lake. We also have silt plugs going all the way back to St. Lambert Parish. But if we're gonna divert water from Catawba to our area, I think we need to worry about opening it up and dredging and make sure that we're capable of handling the capacity of water that we bring in. And the Keystone locks, I've been hearing a lot about the Keystone locks and opening up and all, and I agree. But one thing I want people to know, because I don't think everybody here understands this, but the Bar Pit Canal we're talking about is what comes down Bayou Ami, goes into Bayou Bayrard, Bayou Mercer, travels down to Bayou Alexandre, goes out into Lake Dautrive. That water actually meets up with the Bayou TECHE going out at the bottom. That opening where that water goes out is no water in the width of this room. So we bottleneck, we tighten it up. So when we start diverting water, we need to make sure that we can pass that water and get it out. Because like Mr. Cormier said, and look, I think the people in St. Martin Parish are some of the greatest people I know, most caring and loving people, and I can speak on their behalf, where we don't want to see Lafayette flood. We want to help our neighbors and everything. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we get looked at and we taken care of, and we don't flood at the same point. I think we need to look at all these aspects and everything before we start moving pumps and opening pumps up to see where this water is going to go, and if we're prepared to handle this water. Another thing is, we talked about the levee system in Henderson. There's a hole in the levee, the size of this room, where you could probably hide 2 18-wheelers. They probably ain't but about 6 foot wide. Those holes have been repaired 4 or 5 times. The Corps doesn't have the money to repair them. And that's basically what it comes down to. They just not enough funding to get it done. The more water we divert to the basin, the more pressure we put on our levees. We have pipelines running north, east and west in our levees, building small banks. SS are 56 foot high, some places. That puts more of a strain on some of the levees in the Henderson community and that area back. So I think while we're looking at saving Lafayette, saving Youngsville, saving St. Martin Parish, saving what's on this side of the levee too, we need to look on the other side and make sure that we're capable of taking care of that water before we start moving around too much. Thank you.
Chris is absolutely right. If we're gonna put more water down the Bar Pit Canal from Catawba, the channel capacity has to be there. And I would guess that the flood that came over those dams brought a lot of sediment and a lot of shoaling. I was astonished when I went from Catahoula to Lake Dautrive. That big bar pit is only 4 or 5 feet deep. So if we're going to move water into the Lake Falls Point system, the Corps designed to take our local flooding, we have to make sure the plumbing is adequate. And what Chris is talking about, down the whole Bayou TECHE system drains through the Charenton-Baldwin Canal into West Côte Blanche Bay in a place they call the Jaws, and that is completely closed. There's only one little spot on the east bank that's 3 or 4 feet deep that a small outboard can get through. Now tomorrow in Morgan City, I will be representing our area, asking for a coastal restoration project that would dredge that mud flat and restore the channel capacity that drains the whole Bayou TECHE system. Hopefully we can get that done. And of course, quickly, Ron Bustani, who's chairing that meeting, when I brought this to him, he said, bring it in as a suggested project. It's a problem with funding, and I assured him that Congressman Higgins is going to help us with that. So hopefully we can get that done. We lean in a lot on Jared and his boss.
I just want to say, to address some of the most recent comments about saving this area and that area, and of course, I think Guy and I both touched on that. That's our major bond at the parish APC level, the parish presidents, is that we don't do improvements or we don't make decisions that will impact negatively our neighbors. So that I think historically in the last 30, 40 years and maybe forever is what has somewhat stopped some of the projects, as we didn't get together as public entities. We just found the strongest senator in the strongest area and we got the money where the muscle was, and it didn't matter what happened to our neighbors, just so we got ours done. But that's not how our philosophy runs. Our philosophy is to make sure we don't do what you fear. And so Guy and I and the rest of the presidents, we commit to that. So that's why it takes some study before you just jump into even a local project. You have to consider the impact. So we have our commitment on that.
Thank you. Just got a tweet from Donald Trump. He said he didn't appreciate the fact that Harold has this meeting tonight. He said his viewing audience is smaller. He said he knows that you you don't have a bumper sticker on your truck. He knows that for sure. You do not have a cap that says "Make America Great Again." But he just asked that for the sake of getting a few more viewers out there, if you could maybe start wrapping it up.
I have some value engineering for you. Since you're going to build some detention ponds,
they can come here. Tell them to come here.
I'll suggest you use those
They
as
went to
fire
terrace.
prevention ponds.
Great idea.
Look at some, since you have a lot of volunteer fire department in your area, that'd be a great way to add some value to those detention ponds.
Great idea.
Lower insurance rates. And I'd also like to have Mr. Wingate please sign your document. I've been reading it for a number of years. Thank you.
We just to echo what he said. When you think retention detention, you think it's a pond in the middle of Sugar Mill Pond, which that's a retention detention. They have some also in River Ranch. But really, some of these things we've seen, some of these examples we've seen in the upland areas, they play soccer on them 5-10 years before they actually have to use them, or maybe they use them for recreational purposes, but when a big rain comes, it floods it. And then you heard me say a flash flood is a couple of days later, there's no more water, it just gets all out. And so we even get thinking about getting creative and doing some of that stuff as well with some of this retention detention, not just use them as a hole in the ground. I'm reminded of the show Parks and Recreation. The whole show is about a hole in the ground, right? But use them for recreational purposes and just different things like that.
Thank you, Guy. We have a Vermilion Parish. I know Vermilion Parish has a Vermilion Bayou problem, and they had a very extensive flooding, all the way from Maurice to Abbeville and beyond. And they also dealing with a problem around Gaydon and Kaplan in the Mermentau Basin, which Lafayette Parish shares the same problem, certainly to the west as you go west of Scott into the Rhine area. A big part of Lafayette Parish is in that Mermentau watershed. So you might share with us some of your thoughts.
Let's see. All right. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. No, we do have some issues and we have concerns, I'm just getting involved. I'm just recently became the president of the jury, but I've been keeping abreast of it. But our issues we have is the water has to come through us. It has to come down. Like Bear's worried about, like other people are worried about. It's what's going to come down through us. We had extensive flooding in 16. Maurice got flooded again in 17. They had homes that had flooding. Big concern is if you open, you want to get water, you want to help everyone out, but we're losing our coast. We're subsiding. So all of that is real. It's true. So if we clean out all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, we have water coming in. We have saltwater intrusion. When we have storms, the water's coming up quicker to us. So in 2016, we had 3 days of strong southeast wind right before this event. So all of the marshes in Vermilion Parish and all of the low-lying area in Vermilion Parish was already flooded. It was totally, we had no retention. We didn't have anything. In an event, some of that could come down to Vermilion and spread out. It doesn't happen. It's where we're living. That's what we're living in now. It's some of the things we're facing, but we want to work with the parish, and I'm glad that we have all of these parishes together. I think that we'll be able to accomplish some good things. We just all want to make sure we're all working together and worrying about what our actions can do to the other parishes, and I really like the way this is going. So that's all I have to add.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
You guys are recommending restoring the Vermilion River to design stage, which was based on 1950 estimates. Is that sufficient enough to handle the runoff today or in 2050?
I can't answer that question. That may be addressed to Mr. Wingate there. He probably wouldn't know either.
You know, that's, you know, we spoke about this, that's why you've got to do the necessary modeling. You know, even the modeling that was performed back in the 1995 study, that is dated now. That river's shoaled in, rains are more frequent, we've heard about that. So updated modeling is going to be required to determine if that's a prudent use of dollars. I'm sure that there's some depth that's going to provide benefit, but we don't know until you do that modeling.
We do know the frequency of high waters is dramatically increasing. So we know that much, okay? So anything would help. Whether it's going to solve the problem or not, I don't know.
Any other questions? Before Mr. Howard wraps it up, I just want to say, I would have never imagined when he called me that just me having a real relationship with all our parish presidents and picking up the phone. I got to say this, everyone I called, without hesitation, said, I'm there. And we hosted the first meeting in St. Martin Parish at my chambers, and I expected to have 20 people, and we had 100 people, mostly from Lafayette. And so I never imagined that initial phone call would turn into this, and it only turned into this because of you, the public, that got involved in it, and you want to see some end result. So I guess this, not really a sad thing, but so because I kind of led the charge, I feel like I got to just tell you that I'll be stepping out of my position as a parish president within probably 32 days, I think I'm counting, and moving on to a state position that's going to allow me to work even better with the region. And I'm going to be honest with you, the reason why I got the job, the reason why I got the call is because of what we were doing in Acadiana. They recognized that we had the ability, or I had the ability to pull people together for one common cause. And so I'll be going to work for the association that works with all the parishes. But I only say that because I want to make sure that this thing continues to move, and it's only going to continue to move with your participation. And he's never gonna take the credit for it. But I just want to give Mr. Howard a round of applause, because without him, none of this can happen. In fact, some people I was talking to from other parishes, they keep hearing his name, and they said, "Is this guy a walking encyclopedia?" And I said, when it comes to water, either water quality, water shed, water runoff, he is a walking encyclopedia. So thank you for what you've done, Mr. Howard, and
Thank you.
And to the Sierra Club for putting this event on tonight.
Right, thank you. I want to thank everybody who came out, especially our panel of really distinguished citizens, the Corps of Engineers who came all the way from New Orleans, Munich, and all our people, Dave Dixon, all his work, all of you folks coming out. Jared, your boss, encouraging us to meet, and I want to say our Lafayette Sierra Club.org, LafayetteSierraClub.org. If you tune in on that, we'll keep you posted on the decisions that are affecting this particular issue. Donald, thank you a lot for being here. The New Orleans district, we treasure our relationship, especially with Mark, because he's been very involved for many, many years, and I know he's with us in every way that he can be with us. So again, thanks. Let's give a hand to everybody that came.